liberty, and justice for all.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to tonight's meeting. Hello, board.
Hello.
Okay, so I have to add onto the agenda, I want to add on increasing hours for the bookkeeper, so just add that on.
Bookkeeper assistant, you mean?
I'm sorry, the bookkeeper's assistant, I guess?
What?
The part-time
Part-time,
bookkeeper.
thank you.
Thank you, the part-time
Thank you.
bookkeeper. So we just need to talk about increasing her hours. We can talk about the court parking. I don't know how much we can talk about it, but we'll tie that into the grievance from the potential grievance from the employees on our building unhealthiness. And Jeff and I will do a quick update on a contract negotiation we had today.
Okay.
So with that, do I have,
So moved.
and...
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any-
I
apologize.
think we should, I think we should go into executive session to discuss a long overdue contract that we
I
have.
saw your email.
Yeah.
I mean, is there something we can?
Well, that's someone,
resolve
do you want to make a motion later, or make a motion now to go into executive session, and we can decide to go in later? Is that a motion?
I want to give everybody a heads up.
So
Okay, so,
Okay.
is it for, contract negotiations?
Yes.
Well, you don't put
Well,
it on
actually,
the
it's
end,
right,
but-
no, actually, down here it says contract negotiations, which
So
I
if we
have
need-
on there.
If we need to go into executive
So
session.
after
then
we
will.
do
Okay.
the warrants and prepay whatever, then we can
Okay.
make a motion to go in, and if we make it
Okay.
and it gets the votes, we'll go in.
Okay.
But that's why it's there.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, so do I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any public input? Okay, seeing that there's no public input tonight, we'll do a couple of announcements. First, what I want to do is announce that there was this Hudson Valley Psychological Association that did a 2013 Psychological Healthy Communities Awards. And they're very, very, very competitive, and a lot of organizations apply, and it's a very prestigious award within the psychological community, okay? And New Paltz rocked the boat this year, and out of really about 5 people that get honored, 5, 6 people, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out of 8 things, New Paltz took 3. 2 under the auspices of the town and 1 under the college. The New Paltz Youth Program
Oh, yeah.
got a Healthy Community Award, 2013 Psychologically Healthy Community Award, and so did the Community Partnership for a Safer New Paltz. So they both got those awards, which was really fantastic. So did the Institute for Disaster of Mental Health, which is a program through the college, through SUNY New Paltz. It's an amazing program. So basically, the majority of awards went to New Paltz for a psychologically healthy community. And so that was really terrific, and there was an awards dinner, of which I had gotten invited to, and Jim was there, and Phoenix was there, and they got honored. It was really terrific, so I just want the community to know that. Also, what I want to announce, it's good and it's not so good, but we actually got today the commission, the petition for the Time Warner Cable for approval of the renewal of its franchise with the town of New Paltz and Ulster County got its approval. So the good news is that the contract's approved. The good news is we should be getting about $240,000 into the B fund of revenue money for the line extensions that we don't need to be doing anymore. And the bad news is that now the senior discount, anybody who's in the senior discount will continue to get it, but nobody will be able to sign up going forward. So we'll post this on Facebook tomorrow, but we did get the notice from the Public Service Commission that it did get approved.
So is it as of this date?
I
No
think
new-
so. I did get on April 1st, 2013, blah, blah, blah. I got the notice today from Brendan email from Time Warner, basically telling me that this got approved, and therefore, anybody who's already getting the senior discount will continue to get it, but, no new signups. So it might be as of today, but I can follow up and find out.
Okay.
But I do want to announce that, but we did get that, so that's finally taken care of. Does anybody else have any,
Could you
other
gi-
than the July 4th?
Well, yeah, could you give the July 4th?
You want me to, well, I think Steve Warren was going to come, so he might be able
Oh,
to do an
never.
update, but it is July 6th, it's Saturday, July 6th, it's coming up. I think the gates open at 5 o'clock. There's a lineup of some phenomenal people. It starts with a group for kids, for young kids and stuff, and I think the person who's performing, I think might have won a Grammy or something, so they're supposedly fantastic. Then there's going to be a teenage group from Kingston that does an amazing, amazing performance. There's a wonderful jazz musician who's all over the place, and then Soul Purpose, and then there'll be the fireworks, and then Soul Purpose will come back and do more afterwards in order to stagger parking. But I think the gates open at 5, and it should
And
be,
there'll be free kids activities.
there'll be free kids activities, there'll be a
5 o'clock.
bounce, there'll be
Bouncy house, yeah.
bouncy house, and a couple of other things, and then there'll be food, and it should be a wonderful event. So, that's happening. And is there anything else that needs to be announced?
Do you just want to let everybody know that
What?
we're closed next Thursday?
So Rosanna wants me to tell everybody that next Thursday, Town Hall, July 4th, is closed for July 4th, for the Independence Day. So, anything
There's
else?
a new leg of the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail will open on Saturday.
Oh, right.
We are now going all the way through Kingston, through to Kingston, park at the Bin of Water parking lot in Rosendale. I think the festivities begin at 11:30, but you can go to the Wallkill Valley Land Trust website to see the full lineup of events. And this is really a historic
The
moment.
bridge is open.
The bridge
It's-
will
bridge-
be
it's-
It'll be the
open.
opening of-
They drove the last screw
That's amazing.
last week, this end of last week, I think.
I don't know. It's on
Yes.
the front page of the Poughkeepsie Journal today.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So this is the trestle bridge in Rosendale that they've been
Right.
renovating,
So you
that they'll
can-
be opening on Saturday.
Great.
So that's
So you'll
really
be able to
terrific.
go from Kingston, someday Albany to New York City will be a reality.
It will.
Someday it will be a
It will.
reality.
We're
Absolutely,
getting closer
absolutely.
by the
And
end.
and I also just got a phone call, if anybody's been following the sales tax issue. The sales tax was not carried. It was blocked by our Assemblyman Cahill. It was blocked. So it did not make it through the session. There's been some real agonizing at the county in regards to what to do. And unfortunately, today they closed on the nursing home, so a number of employees who were close to retirement, there was impact negotiations that were going on to help these people get carried over into the retirement system, unfortunately are the poor victims of whatever's been going on. But I did just get a call from Legislator Rodriguez, who's in a Ways and Means meeting in the county, and the Assemblyman is there. And supposedly what's happening right now is the county's going to reaffirm via resolution that they're going to take over the 1/3 this year, 1/3 next year, 1/3 the following year. So after 3 years, they will take over the whole safety net, which was what was in place and we were working on anyway, but the legislature is affirming it, and supposedly the Assemblyman said he won't stand in the way. The problem is there now has to be a special session up in Albany for that to happen.
How much money have we lost?
Well, we haven't lost anything yet because it expires November 30th. So what would happen is that 1% sales tax wouldn't get collected during Christmas. And then, okay, which is the biggest time for sales tax revenue. And then if it doesn't get carried going into next year, the county loses $22 million. The county would lose $1.8 million if it doesn't get extended for that 1 month of December.
And
then-
1% equals 22 million, correct?
Yes, for the county.
Right. For the
It's
county.
actually 28 million.
28 million.
28 million because the other 7 million gets split between the city of Kingston and then the 22 towns or whatever split 2%. So you get, so there's 22 million, then there's another 7 million, of which 3 million goes to the city of Kingston, and then the rest gets split between the 22 towns. And so if it doesn't get extended, come the month of December, we lose that 1% during Christmas time. That's revenue we'll be getting that we lose. If the county doesn't pick up the safety net, that third, that's money we have to find in our budget to cover because, and then going forward next year, it could be a horrific situation. But for the moment, there seems to be an agreement. Now it's whether there's going to be a special session. Now, unfortunately, if there is a special session, don't forget, remember, every legislator gets paid per diem to go to Albany. So to have a special session costs the state taxpayers about $25,000. So, and I don't know how you're going to get somebody down from Buffalo to come to a meeting in Albany to pass a sales tax extension for Ulster County. So we have to hope that there's some reason the governor wants to call them back in.
So, and that most likely wouldn't happen until the fall.
It definitely won't happen until the fall.
So
We're
then
not
it would
going
be
back.
post our budget, so we have an issue already.
We have to sort of really get a sense in the next week or two or three and, to see where things
So
are
we need,
really
you need
going.
to prepare your September budget thinking we're not going to get that tax.
Not only not get that tax, but also have to put
Safety
back the
net.
money for the safety net that we've already taken 60,000 out. And now let's also remember that last year, what was in the budget last year was 60,000 for safety net, but the bill was 120,000. So we had to find that money. We also had to find the money for the $150,000 for state retirement that we got hit with at the very end. That was not in the budget.
What's
So
the-
that's already $210,000.
What is the state paying for anymore?
That's a very good question. Actually, there was an article in today's paper. It wasn't an article. There was a letter by the superintendent of Middletown talking about how the state in this year's legislative session did 78 unfunded mandates that affect towns and schools, and how that's money that the towns and school districts have to come up with, that then they have the 2% property tax cap, but meanwhile, retirement and insurance and everything else is increasing, so the pressure on the schools and the towns to cut services is getting harder and harder and harder, and more and more intense. So I actually was going to try to get in touch with our superintendent to find out what all the unfunded mandates were that came down from the state.
Oh, and the other good
So-
news is night shift's probably going to go up 15% next year.
Yeah, we were told that
They've already
insurance is going to go up.
announced it. We just found that out
We
today.
found out today that insurance might go up 15% next year.
A
Nice show.
concise, just statement about Mr. Cahill's position on it, because I still don't quite, I can't come to grips with what he's thinking. What is the rationale for giving up probably the best tax we could collect, which is a sales tax, which is a consumption tax? What's the rationale for giving that up?
Well, I don't want
He
to...
did post a press release which said that he believed that funding elections and the safety net were expenses that counties should be paying for, which is something that I agree with. However, the time to implement those policies is January, not June. And the
not
time to have,
Not four days before the end of the
Right.
session.
And not giving
Well-
us, or putting us in a position where we're going to lose
Right.
any money.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I will not profess to speak for the Assemblyman. What I have read, he never did vote to, vote for sales tax, and he never carried it, but he also never blocked it. His rationale, from what he says, when you read it, he believes that the sales tax is regressive because the poor people suffer by having to pay the sales tax. But there's a lot of people who believe it's actually really more progressive in the sense that when you think about a lot of the sales tax comes from tourism, from people outside of the community, that it's being spent by people outside the community helping to offset some costs. The fact that obviously people with money have more money to spend, so they're probably paying a greater portion of the, of the sales tax. And yes, it's, the more you consume, you pay this, whatever, the more revenue we get. So some people believe that that's a better way to get revenue than doing it on property tax, because at a certain point, tax gets to a point people can't afford their homes. And that is people's one big purchase kind of stuff. So in the past, he never blocked it. He just let somebody else carry it. This is the first time it was blocked. And why he did that, I can't say.
Okay.
And what I can say, though, is the county's been talking and taking over, the safety net, and they've been talking about the election cost, and that was a conversation that was happening. So it's not like these conversations haven't been going on, So ultimately, at the end of the day, we'll see where this goes in the next couple of weeks. So, any other announcements or whatever? Nope. Okay, so let's get into the business. As long as we have our wonderful recycling coordinator, Laura Pettit, here, why don't we bring her up? We have an issue with recycling center gates. We did have a problem, back in 1996, 97, where somebody almost fell off of, somebody actually did fall off.
They did, yeah.
Mr. Jenkins fell off of, when he was doing recycling, right? He fell off of the, because it's high up, there were no gates.
Between the commingled and the newspaper
Right, he
container.
fell, and he got hurt, too.
He did,
And
yeah.
so literally, the next day, we got rails put up. And so those rails have been up there since 1997.
And they've been
And,
hit by cars and just, wear and tear.
And here's the
so-
good news, if
Here's
Laura's
the good
asking
news.
for money, you know
Right,
she's got a
I
grant
know.
somewhere. You know
Laura,
she's
can
got
you,
a grant. So, Laura, if you're asking for money, there's a grant with this, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
knew it.
Actually, if you look, and I do
get
have,
one.
oh, I'm sorry, I have the special copy for you,
Oh, Jen.
because I've got income from last year, this year to date, along with I figured if
Okay.
Jean was going to be here, she wants to know what budget line is going to be coming out of, so I
I
have that.
will just, so people do know that the reason why Jean is not here is not because she doesn't want to be with us. It's because she has some very serious health issues, and so therefore she's not able to work to her full level. So we all wish Jeannie a speedy recovery, and we hope Jean gets better soon, but it's not possible for her to be at a meeting.
Okay.
So Laura, why don't you take over?
Okay, so what we have, of course, is the railings that go around the perimeter of a bi-level site. So the site sits up about 6 to 7 feet above ground. So if there's nothing there, that's a substantial fall onto concrete. The fencing, again, with the use of equipment and I coming in, there's been a lot of wear and tear. It's no longer secured to the ground. So if you lean on it, you tip. And I heard somebody say, whoa, the other day, and he was leaning and almost fell in the container. So before we get to that point, we'd like to take care of that. We have, a couple suggestions as far as replacing the railing, repairing it, but the cost will be about $1,000. That includes materials, incidental fasteners, et cetera. And the work will be done by town departments, so there's no outside
It'll
fees
be done by
there.
Building and Grounds,
Buildings,
Highway.
ground, or
The
our
highway.
staff, yeah.
Uh-huh.
We had also, I figured I'd better put this in, of course, we're doing the food waste recycling. I think we've taken in $16,000, a little bit over so far this year. I just got another check for $1,800, so that needs to be added in. But, along with that, it was a very simple, low-tech site. It was static piles. And because the Resource Recovery Agency is under environmental monitoring, the DEC comes up about 3 times a week. And when they do, if they, see anything, so his concern was, making sure all the leachate stays on the site. So I went to the highway superintendent. He sent staff out. We've put concrete down. We've put in perforated pipe. The specs for it was actually, we worked with a correctional officer who's retired. And he's always worked very closely with the DEC. His name's Jim Marion, so I owe him a real long thank you letter. He also had set the deer composting up throughout the state, so he was very well liked. Of course, when the DEC heard that I found him, because he's been long retired, they were very happy. But we did have to do some minor upgrades to the site. Again, this is all materials. Piping, it was a holding tank. In case any leachate does not, actually stay on the pad and runs out, we can collect it that way. Now, this will be reimbursable under grant funding. Excuse me. So, and we've already received notification that we're on the DEC list. I think I included this, many months ago, but we've got 2 grants that we're on the list for now. One is the brush. That's $128,000, and the other one is the food waste, and that was about $95,000. So, of course, we have to spend it and wait. I did take that one and extended it over a 3-year period, though. So we wouldn't have to budget for it all within one year. And of course, one of the pieces of equipment we're splitting with highway. So.
Is the college bringing their food waste now?
The college, well, that's all
Well,
other.
that's how
yeah.
it started, right?
Yeah.
That's how it started.
Actually, they were out today. They did a complete tour. We wanted to address any of the contamination issues. SUNY New Paltz uses durable goods, so they have silverware and they have rigid plates. That's what we're finding. When we sell the final product, they're saying, well, there's utensils in there. And we do get a small amount from Vassar and Marist. Of course, when they do a route, they're not going to run out and dump it and go back and finish a route. So if they're doing an orientation for transfer students or new freshmen, and they put out all those nice, water bottles and yogurt containers, that's what we were seeing, within the food waste that was coming in. Vassar said they found their source for contamination. They took care of it immediately. SUNY wanted to come out and take a look and see what it was.
So
So,
they came out today.
and they did, yeah.
So by
Yeah.
contamination, do you mean silverware? and-
Silverware, some plastics, once in a
Anything
while,
that's
some
not food.
server go, yeah. And I offered to go in, even if it's once a month, if they have staff meetings, and just speak and kind of reaffirm and retrain whoever is there. That we learned early on when we did the tour at Mohawk. And of course, they're well-known for their wonderful compost. But Tom Smiley, who gave us the tour then, said you need to, you were with
I was-
us.
yes.
Yes.
I was elected but not
You know,
inaugurated.
Yes, that's right, that's right. You were in from for the long haul, from the get-go. So he says you do need to retrain frequently.
But Jeff, yeah, we are getting the stuff from the college, but now there's a little caveat with the Resource Recovery Agency in terms of
Yeah,
trying to
did you want
divert
to
some
bring
of
that
it.
up now, or?
Why not?
They've been talking about it for a
It's a
while.
contract, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, I don't think they're under contract for a certain amount to be delivered. However, and they were asking a fair rate. They were about 50 a ton. McEnroe, which is out in Dutchess County, was 53 a ton. We came in at 40, because again, we're low-tech, we didn't invest anything in the infrastructure, and we mainly put it together so we could take in SUNY waste and further divert SUNY or New Paltz material. But apparently, the agency wasn't getting any material. So what they've done, this was in a meeting May 20th, they lowered their tipping fees to $30 a ton. And when the hauler came in this week, he said, well, of course, you're going to be lowering yours. I said, no. And there's no need for us to do that. There's a couple of options.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
The first option would be to take that on as an extension of the recycling program and contract with SUNY to pick the waste up and bring it to our facility. They're paying a substantial amount now. We could certainly give them a much better deal because, we're not charging them for all kinds of overhead for specialized vehicles. It would just be a staff person. The other option would be to ask if, when they do go out to bid for this refuse removal, that they put in contractual flow control and insist that it gets delivered to the New Paltz site. So that's two things that we can do.
That would be the college that would do that.
That would be the college.
But we'd have to
yeah.
ask them to do something like that.
Yes, we would. We'd have to approach them on that. But that would be a discussion for the board.
is that people like Lisa Mitten on that
Yes,
committee?
yeah, from sustainability. Kim Nelson as
Right.
well.
But we could also ask our two legislators to meet with you, meet with some of us to sort of talk about the fact of, not wanting the Resource Recovery Agency to be undercutting New Paltz.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It's like, we go into this program, we put this program in place, and then we're
For
using.
New Paltz, yeah.
And then to have, them
Right,
coming
all of a
undercut
sudden it gets
us.
very competitive.
It's not-
It had been done already. Earlier this year, when the driver for Royal Karting, who's a hauler for New Paltz, came in, he had said some pressure was put on them to bring material into the Resource Recovery Agency. And that's fine. We're a registered facility. We can only take in 1,000 yards. Royal had reached out to some other retailers locally, and they're picking up from Stop and Shop. So there's too much waste. So they want to bring some out to Ulster County, that's fine. But now I'm wondering, why reduce it? Why take that much of a hit with their revenues? Because you figure they're going to be losing $20,000 a year?
Well, that's what they do.
Because they're going to make it
Their
up with the flow
business model.
control.
Yeah, they only
And
lost 25 million trying to find a new dump. I mean, what's another
Yeah.
20,000?
And in 2018, it really looks like the state's going to ban organics from the waste stream. In Ulster County terms, that's 50,000 tons. All right, we're only registered to take 500 tons. The Resource Recovery Agency is only registered to take 500 tons. There's going to be plenty of organics to share.
So is this like a predatory pricing
Yeah. Working for them, that's what was done.
And
The
so-
bigger you are, the longer you can hold out by taking a hit until the little guy goes
The margins
under.
get compressed to a point where everything collapses.
Well,
Right.
$30 a ton, they're losing money.
Yeah.
They've got to be.
You can't make
So
money at
that can't
$30
be.
a
That's
ton.
technically
A business
illegal
plan.
to price your competition out of business just because you're bigger. It's predatory
But
pricing.
technically, a municipality shouldn't be a competition to the
No,
Resource
it
Recovery
shouldn't.
Agency.
No, but Kevin's
Okay,
got a
technically, we
good
should be a
point.
partner.
Program,
We should be a
It
partner.
sounds like we should be crafting a letter with Kevin's assistance
Well, that's
here
why I was
that-
asking Lori to
Well, I
Laura to
think
bring it
Kevin,
up.
maybe Laura, you should meet, and it sounds like Kevin's correct, is that they are doing predatory pricing to purposely and ask for flow that they know they're losing money on to have them go there, when we are obviously managing it already at a competitive price. We're already $10 cheaper to $13 cheaper.
Right. And because we
and
didn't
we're-
invest $60,000 in the facility as they did.
Right.
I'd
They
like
had
to see the
engineers.
minutes for the decision to lower the price to 30.
You have, did you send out that copy of the
It's
minutes?
the minutes from the RA
From-
meeting?
yeah.
No, I'm
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah,
probably
was
if I
that
have it, I can.
distributed?
I just probably didn't get a chance to look
okay.
at it.
Right. Let's put in our budget that we plan to lose another $50,000
Right.
a year, right?
No, that won't happen. This program, even if we get a minimal amount of food waste.
I'm not talking about your budget.
Oh, okay.
No, the
No,
county
but I
budget.
mean for.
No, the
oh,
county,
okay.
just the RA budget.
I mean, we
out of
could
the new
still,
Paltz
we've
site,
got
Clearwater
mulch,
site.
we've got other
No, no.
materials.
But I think, I mean, unfortunately, like here, Laura's taking a leadership role, working with the town of New Paltz behind her to take like a real leadership role, to create like a really sustainable model, with, in this zero waste community model. She took it upon herself, got the DEC, with our support, but got the DEC to buy into it, to approve it, to let her do it, to let her get it started. It's become successful. And then all of a sudden, this county agency comes in and sort of like says, okay, we're going to pull the rug out from
Well,
underneath
it's
you.
like an incubator project.
Right.
We've created here in New
That's
Paltz.
right.
Exactly.
And now, and this kills me, the other governments
Right,
are
thank you.
undermining our local government again.
That's right.
Again.
And they're even saving tremendous costs because they're only hauling it
From there to
from
here.
the center
Oh,
of
sure.
town
Right.
to
Yeah.
Right,
a mere
right.
4 miles out of town, and they want them to haul it how far?
Up to Kingston.
Up to Kingston.
So that's probably 22 miles, 23
So
miles?
unfair to the county taxpayers. It's just, there
And-
have to
and
be
there's
closer
money to be
sources.
made.
And
I mean,
it's just a
if you-
waste of fossil fuels to
Right.
for them to be
yeah.
running the
Yeah.
trucks an extra.
So I think what we
20
should
miles,
do
30
is to
miles.
follow up is, Kevin, if you're willing to help work on a letter, but I think what we should also do is get a meeting with our two legislators and
Get
basically
Ken Hector and all
get,
that,
Kevin and
I like your
Kevin. So-
thinking, though. I like your thinking. Whenever you compete, you drive other efficiencies to keep the business. So you said two things that I like the first one.
Kevin, you just need to talk a little louder because I could barely hear you.
I don't want everybody to hear me, though.
So those of you
I
listening,
don't think the county,
I like your idea.
it's
Your
listening.
first idea is something that
To
we
offer
should-
the service.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and soon you would be saving a lot of money as
Yes.
well.
And we already have the vehicle, and I apologize, Kevin, we have the vehicle and the
and we have the
manpower.
containers, and yeah, we would have the
So
manpower.
we have
I
a-
recommend we go ahead and do that.
Possibly a
Okay,
green
so
job
it's
where
for-
we could get
So
more
our
funding
goal
for it.
is that our state institution saves money, our town makes money, and our county doesn't lose money.
Right, right.
and our environment.
That's kind of our mission here.
And Kitty, and our environment is healthier.
And our,
So
right.
would there be
Oh, so how
anything?
much money did you need in case you lose the sales tax funding? 50,000,
I don't
right?
think we're quite at
It's a
22
few
million.
100,000, yeah. It's for us,
Well, for next year,
I
yeah.
think we should authorize you to go ahead and pursue that
Okay.
option.
Okay, so do you
would
want
you
to?
need
Sooner rather
funding
than
for
later.
that, or do you want to come back to us with what funding?
We wouldn't need, they do require 6-day-a-week pickup. So I think, again, some of the thinking was, we have split shifts. We do, Monday through Friday, and then Tuesdays through Saturdays. We need 2 people on, of course, on Saturdays.
But I wondered, Kevin's thinking though, too, I mean, I think if you were willing to go that extra piece, they may not require 6-day, they may be able to
Oh, that's
accommodate.
possible,
you
too,
know,
yeah. Yeah, set up some
They
extra
may be able to,
containers.
it would save them money, because they may be able to accommodate 5-day. It sounds to me like if you talk to some of those college people, that they may be more than willing to work with us.
And you
Okay.
develop the model that's implemented there.
Yes.
And then that saves you time on the other end.
And because the college would like to.
Right, so we're not picking out the contamination, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so would you be
Okay.
willing to draft up a?
No, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so why don't we make a motion to authorize Laura to pursue a recommendation to,
Go into contractual negotiations for pickup of organic food waste from SUNY New Paltz
So moved.
campus.
okay. I'll second for purposes of conversation. Would we want to, or am I making, if we were going to do something like that, would we want to expand it to asking like all the restaurants in town, for, to,
Can you handle that?
Yeah, let's.
Not with the staff, and there's still discussion about municipal, but that was at the village level.
But I think
Okay, so let's
you
start.
have a very good point, though. I think then where Susan's going is our downtown businesses are very compressed. I mean, Stop and Shop is self-contained,
Right, picking them up
but
on
our
the way
downtown
over.
businesses are very compressed. So the thought process that Susan's having probably is a good one to pursue is, would they be willing to look at a communal drop
right,
point?
exactly.
Because
That's a
I'll
good
use
idea,
myself
actually.
Right.
as an example. I would gladly walk 2 blocks for any of my food waste if we had a communal spot and that we would pick up 5 days a week or whatever. But like maybe Stop and Shop,
good
I don't know
idea.
how they segregate theirs. So
I mean, as long
that
as
might be
we're
worthwhile
excited.
looking into.
Yeah.
Or in a community recycling container would be a nice idea,
Exactly.
too.
Yeah, absolutely, for people who can't do their own
Well,
composting,
right,
so.
right. And you can market the material as well.
Gardens
so
for
that's-
nutrition.
we
would
like
be
that.
That'd be a
an
great idea.
excellent point.
That's a great place.
But we can
So
make a
this is
spot
where the
downtown where they
other
can walk
revenues
to.
will come
Every
from.
business could
Yeah.
walk to. I'm
Yeah.
sure we could.
So why don't we
I think
do it
New
on,
Paltz would
so
grasp
why
that.
don't we amend it to just say we'll do it as a phase where the first priority is to work with the college to see if we can't work on, get something done, but then simultaneously, if we are going to pursue this, to then take it to the next level to see how we accommodate it for the, for the community. Okay, so do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion so
wonderful.
carried, great, thank you.
And
So
this
now,
was brought up, I mean, the EPA was very interested in
Rosanna.
home
Well, we have to
rule
figure out
and
where we're
each
gonna-
township managing their own
that's gonna come.
materials.
But what we didn't
Put us
vote on,
ahead of
though,
the
is the
curve.
money, so.
well, that's what
The
we're about to
money.
now, so let's,
Now, we did get reimbursed almost 73,000. Part of it was the education grant. I think I came to you in 2008 with that. I told you it would take a while to
Yeah.
get. And then the other was partial reimbursement for the waste reduction grant, which covered 50% of the building, some of the new equipment, and the salary for the recycling assistant last year. Susan just signed off on another 52,000 in reimbursement requests.
I was so happy to do that,
Yay.
because usually I'm starting off on spending money, but Laura
I know, sugar.
but Laura gave me something where we were actually getting money. I was very, very happy.
So since our budget line, we only budgeted for 50,000, I was hoping I could take 4 of that just to offset monies that weren't put into this budget for other site upgrades. Again, the one for the cost to upgrade the food waste, that will be reimbursed. That's that long-term grant.
No, that's fine.
So the 3096 comes out of, is going to be grant
That'll be
money.
50% reimbursed, yeah.
And then the other $1,000 is just coming out of, also still just the revenues from this, or?
No, that's reimbursable.
Yeah,
Is that
I
the
think,
fruit fence?
my way of thinking when I did this was, we already spent the 3,000 out of our operating budget, but we hadn't budgeted for doing that this year. So since it was spent and we got unanticipated grant reimbursement in, we could move some of that into
Right.
operating just to replenish
So
what
you want to
I,
move 4,000?
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
But, so we're moving $4,000 from the revenue line AAA 980-3599000
Yes,
into your,
into the operating line.
3 AAA 980 8189 4,000.
well, operating would be
It's
Wouldn't it be
8189.4.
0.4, that's
Yeah,
contractual.
yeah.
Okay.
That's where I write all the funding out of.
Okay.
Point 1 is
Personnel.
personnel.
Right.
Personnel.
Point 2 is
Okay.
equipment, yeah.
Okay, so do you have that?
Is it on there?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't say where it's moving to.
On
It's
the
just
very
say-
bottom it
on the
does, I'm
very
sorry.
bottom.
We need
Oh,
to
okay,
put
I'm
it for
sorry,
a
it
new
does.
copier
Okay.
next year.
Okay, so well, let's hold off and see. Okay,
Keep
but
your
that's,
eyes
but that's
Yeah, we
3,000.
get plenty of those in, yeah.
But that's also counting the $1,000 up here?
Yes, that we haven't spent yet.
So it's really 4,096 you're asking for, not 4,000?
Well, 4,000, that'll be all right.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, so I have a motion.
I know we,
So
by
moved.
Kevin, and a second by Kitty. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion so carried.
Okay,
Thank you for
thank
all
you
your
very
work.
much.
Thank you so
No,
much.
Thanks,
thank
Laura,
you.
for everything you
It's
do.
been
You really
so
have
wonderful
no
working
idea.
with New Paltz. It really has.
So you have no idea when the grant money is going to come in? You just
No,
open up the
it's-
mail one day and,
Yeah, and there it is. The waste reduction money, they said the reimbursement would be much quicker. However, we submitted that in September, and it took that long to come in. So, and of course, the other thing with the recycling education, the capital equipment grants, those are going to take about 3 to 4 years. It depends on the state budget, it depends on who's ahead of you as far as the funding. You just kind of move up the lines.
Right.
And then when your name reaches the top, they'll send out a contract.
right?
So,
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
thanks
so much.
Thanks, Laura. As usual, you're on top of everything.
well, I try.
You're great. Okay, so moving along, what we have is, I'll do it next really quickly. Well, why don't we work upwards? 2-row wampum. And what it is, it's a resolution endorsing the renewal of the 2-row wampum agreement. Whereas the sovereign nation of the Haudenosaunee Iroquois are people of the Longhouse live sustainably in a region which now includes most of New York State for many hundreds of years before the arrival of the European colonists. Whereas in 2013, the Haudenosaunee, together with their non-native allies, have chosen to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the 2-row wampum treaty, the first agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the European settlers.
Do we have all these documents?
Actually, what I can tell you, Kevin, what I can tell you, Kevin, is there's a bunch of people in New Paltz that have been working on this for over a year and a half.
Okay.
I can also tell you that I was at an event up in Syracuse at the Matilda Jocelyn Gage House, where the chief of
I just want.
the chief was there speaking about this. So what's going to happen is they're going to be leaving up around the Syracuse, further up there. They're coming down the river. They come down in 2 rows, which is the treaty, and they come down in 2 rows, and they come down and they stop in different communities, and they land at they go to the UN for a big event at the UN. So it's a very, very, very big thing.
I'm okay, but I just have a question.
Sure.
When we're asked to pass a resolution,
Yes.
shouldn't we know what we're passing? In the
Yes.
sense
Here's your
that-
resolution.
Yeah, no, but, for example, I don't have any idea what the native treaties say. And I'm not trying to be difficult.
Oh, that's okay.
I just, I don't know, for example, there's 2-row wampum agreements, all right? And then there's this, our support, we're expressing support for the year-long 2-row wampum renewal campaign to honor native treaties and protect the earth. I'm fine with protecting the earth, but I don't know what these native treaties say.
They basically probably
I'm
said,
not
from what I...
trying to be
No, I'm saying,
But
I think what...
for example, this is just hypothetical, and I don't know. Do the
That they-
do the
they're entitled
treaties
back to
say
their
that
land?
They're going to establish casinos in every city
No,
in
no,
South.
no.
What? I don't know.
Well, Kevin, you actually bring up a point, which is something that came up. Oh gosh, I can't remember which resolution it was, but
Oh, I know what you're talking about, Kitty.
it was, I think, the first time we started bombing Iraq. And there was a citizens' resolution that had pages and pages of whereases. And it was the feeling of the town board at that time that a citizen petition should have citations included in the resolution so that we would know exactly what the sources were. And absent those, that the town board would reserve the right to take something like this and create its own resolution based on our own research. So I'm not sure what the date of this event is.
Oh, it's I think it's over the summer, I think. They're going to be doing it we could hold off and do
I'm not
September
trying to be
13th,
difficult,
2006.
but
It's
what-
around
Can
September.
we have
It's-
somebody come in and tell us about
Sure.
what injustices they need redressed? I don't mind supporting
I don't think
stuff.
this one is so much about the injustices, because I have met with some people who've been talking about this. I think the basic issue here is the pollution of the Onondaga.
Okay, well, I wish
And-
it said that.
Right. So I did send you the name of the local lead person on this.
Yeah.
So maybe she can come to
Sure.
our July
I mean, I know
meeting.
that Rosalind Sherry and a whole group of them have been meeting on this for a long time.
Okay.
And stuff, and,
Fine, I just, that when we pass
Sure.
something, we should know what we're supporting.
if you, we'll have somebody come in today, because I think we have time. I got it sent by somebody from Saugerties, but I already had known about this because I've already met with the chief and had met him, and it was really funny because one night, Rosalind Sherry and a group of people were meeting here, and I thought they were doing a fracking meeting, so I asked them, what are you meeting on? And they talked all about this, and I would have come because the chief was coming down, and I would have gone, but I had to get to another meeting. Then, months and months later, when I was up in Syracuse at some event, and the chief talked about it, I went over and said, were you down in New Paltz? And he said, yes. And I said, oh, I was in my office at the time that you were meeting. So we can get some people to come in. I think we have a little bit of time, and let's go from there.
Fine.
Okay, so that's not a problem. Okay, a quick update on the grant for Sewer 6. We were looking to possibly talk about hiring somebody. It all just felt too fast, too quick, too pressured, and just too much in a sense. Because, Dave, we really have to figure out if we really believe that we can fit into this grant, this money that's coming in from FEMA for flooding and stuff, because Sewer 6's problem is not really flooding, and so, and most of the work will be done by Dave Clauser, which has already been done, so he's doing most of the work. Dave and I called Dennis Doyle from the county to talk about who does their grants and all that. They do a lot of them in-house and help write them. So basically, I called Chris Gibson, Congressman Gibson's office, because you have to get a letter of intent to Congressman Gibson, letting them know that you want to be put into the queue and you're going to do the grant. We have to have the letter in next week, the letter of intent. They sent me back the very next morning a sample of what a letter of intent is, a whole bunch of information about the grant, which I haven't had a chance to send out to all of you. And Dennis Doyle said the county would be more than happy to help us do whatever we can't do on our own. So we sort of figured that we could wait in terms of hiring a grant writer because, A, it would be a contract that goes beyond just this grant, and we might have needs going forward with the water system and other things we're doing, but for the moment,
You don't want to pull the trigger yet.
I don't want to pull the trigger yet. It just felt like it was just too much too quick because of the pressure of this grant. And so Dave and I did enough homework to feel comfortable that we could continue to pursue a grant for Sewer 6 and even maybe get this grant, but we'd have to hire somebody, at the cost of $18,000 to the town and get into a long-term contract, that we felt pretty safe that Dave has done enough work on this. And we got the letter of intent from the congressman. I think the congressman's going to be willing to help us if we fit into it and stuff, so we're willing to sort of try to do it, as much as we can, and Dennis Doyle in the county is willing to help us, in terms of putting the grant together, so we just sort of felt comfortable that this is the best way to go forward instead of spending money right now. So, we'll get back to you as we pursue it, but I just wanted to bring the update because we talked about it last week. The municipal water system, do you want to take over?
we have the bus
Or do you want to
driver
wait
list?
for, let's
Yeah,
wait for George Lithgow. Okay, the bus driver list is, okay, Carol didn't put it into your boxes because she didn't think you guys would get it in time for the meeting tonight, so.
Yep.
Which one is?
So basically, it's a driver, now what this is for is bus drivers who take the kids who go to the YMCA camp from the school over to the Moriello Pool and back. And so we, last week, entered into a contract to do the buses, and now we have to basically approve Vivian Figaro and Mark Cascio, plus a substitute, who, if one of them is sick, they call somebody in, so we can't give their name because we don't know who the substitute is. But we're authorizing Mark Cascio, Vivian Figaro, and a substitute to authorizing them to be the bus drivers for the kids going to camp at a rate of $25.20 per hour.
It's just three of them?
Yep.
Didn't I recall seeing
Last year we had a
lists
bunch.
Bunch?
Yeah, I think what happened last year is we authorized probably all the bus drivers and then whoever they put
And I
on.
thought there was a different scale. I thought it went from 17 to something.
Yeah, well, whatever, this is basically what we got from the school
Okay.
district, so this is what we have for now
Okay.
and stuff. So this is what I would basically ask I remember the list being much longer too, but I think what it was probably all the bus drivers.
Yeah, I think
And
the
then
use of
whoever,
it,
and then
yeah.
whoever did it. So this must be people who committed to doing it.
Okay.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any more conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion so carried. Okay, so before we get into the two things that George Lithgow can help us with, the municipal water system and Park Point, the only other thing we have, and this is part of that whole FEMA grant, and what Stacy, our building inspector, asked is, she would like us to put in a letter of intent for this hazard mitigation,
Plan.
for the hazard mitigation plan. And then I asked her today if she felt that she could write this grant in essence and stuff. And she said there's it's an online application, and she feels
Very
pretty confident, and it doesn't commit us to anything. It just basically, in essence, is telling them a letter of intent, then we could file it, and then even if we get awarded it, we still don't have to do it. They authorize up to $100,000. She believes we can do a lot by taking hazard mitigation plans from other towns and communities and draft our own, and then we can get reimbursed for the time we spend
And we
on it.
should have
And-
it.
And we couldn't buy out certain people's homes on Doug Road
Yeah.
because of the fact that we didn't have this
thought we
plan.
could.
Right.
So it's our obligation in a way
Right.
to
Yeah.
do this, so this way, God forbid there's more flooding, we're helping and protecting our residents that
Right.
are prone to
Do
flooding.
you have a resolution?
All I need is for you to authorize us to do a letter of intent for the purposes of a hazard mitigation grant.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion so carried. Okay, so I guess before, since George took a break, let's do a quick update.
Actually, can I do a
Sure,
quick thing too?
sure.
This will just save us time at the end. I'd like to request that the supervisor and town board approve the prepayment of the following. On-site computer service for $3,710. It was an invoice that was missed in last month's warrants.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and did you say, Jeff, it was for on-site computer services?
On-site computer service, yeah.
Okay,
Let's just
okay,
get
so
that
this is for the person who fixes our computers.
Yeah, is there any other
which is,
prepays?
That's the
that
only
gotta
one we
get out of the way?
had.
That's what I thought.
So we have a motion and a second? All in favor? Okay, motion so carried. The only thing, and then George, we'll get to George because that's going to be the rest of the meeting, but,
Hours?
what?
You want to talk about the hours?
Oh, we have to do the bookkeeper, yeah, let's do that because that's really important. We can't forget that. Thank you,
No,
Kevin.
let's do that after George. I mean, George doesn't have to sit here for that.
Oh, he's right there. He is.
Well, it's only just authorizing the bookkeeper.
Come on down.
Well, it's only authorizing the bookkeeper.
but-
We can do that later. I just don't want to forget, so let's
We
make,
won't.
it's really important.
Rosanna
Okay.
will not let us forget.
And then I have to give you an update on the potential grievance about town hall and how unhealthy it is for our residents. No, but we were told, I know. Okay, so George, we have two things. The municipal water system.
Daunting.
The municipal water system, definition that you suggested the town do based on the variance that was I don't know, not the variance,
There was a variance application, but
right, bring the microphone closer.
there had been a variance application, but this really concerned a determination by the building inspector that was issued last January. And that determined, among other things, the municipal water supply requirement that's contained in the code could be met by what I would call a backup district, which exists for purposes of ensuring the town can take over if necessary.
And so you had said you suggested to protect the town from legal ramifications of having a code that can't be met, that we should codify the opinion of the building inspector that got held by the ZBA.
That was one consideration, and also to ensure that it was part of the code so that any other applicant who sought RV status would be aware of this mechanism to
Right.
comply.
So we brought that up at the last week as promised. We reviewed it, and Kevin, Councilman Barry, wanted to make it a little bit tighter to impact when we go in and have a municipal system developed, that there's certain standards that are met, and we oversee the whole process. So if we're forced to take over the system, that it meets our criteria, and that's all part of this definition.
Right.
So Kevin had offered to go back and reword some stuff, and so he was bringing it back to us tonight, and he wants to get your opinion.
Dave said that you and he talked about this already, adding maybe a small phrase in there dealing with construction specifications for the system. So it reads, for example, I'll just pick up where it says acceptable and form to the town board as governing board of the district, and the owner of the system has entered into a written agreement with the town setting forth the construction specifications for such system and, go back, the circumstances in which the district may assume ownership.
That would be fine. I believe that it would be required anyway, because you would be also approving the creation of a district that could perform the functions of the water system. And in the course of doing that, you're going to get a plan and report, a map, and specifications. And those would obviously have to be acceptable to the board in order to form the district.
Right.
But I think that would help to put people on notice. It has to meet municipal standards.
Right. I'm
So
fine
is that
with
the only-
was, because now we have the ability under our new definition to allow applicants to meet the requirement.
You already actually have this because of the building inspector's determination. Any other application that's made with the same facts and circumstances would have the benefit of that interpretation. But the only person who would know that offhand would be the building inspector. So this is a way of basically providing notice of what already exists.
Now, if we know we're going to be taking it over, let's just say we know we're going to take over the water system, do we have a right to ask for a certain quantity of water then? So, for example, we wouldn't want to take over a water system if it's just going to feed a single project.
Well, normally, normally you wouldn't. There is one circumstance that I talked about with Dave where it might be in the overall public interest to do that. That's where you have an established facility that's serving a existing population, and for some reason it's not being maintained or it's not meeting public health standards, and the determination is made it would be in the interest to have the town take over operation to ensure that water supply.
That's usually a liability, though.
It's
Right.
not
Yeah, that's what
something-
I know.
It's not something you're looking forward to.
Right, well, so for the example, and that's what my
Yeah.
fear was, the last meeting was that, we keep seeing a lot of stories, particularly trailer parks. Mobile
Well-
home parks end up getting abandoned by their owners, and
Yes.
then the town takes it over. In this case, there's only minimal holes banged in the ground so far. So if we know we're going to take it over, and our future says to us, we're going to take it over also because we don't want just to feed this transportation district, we want to feed multiple areas, multiple water districts, can we ask them to develop it larger than just their site? Or is that not within?
No, I think we could ask them as part of the agreement.
You
produce
would be
X.
able to discuss all of these issues when you're in the process, they're in the process of negotiating.
So that can be discussed, though. You can say, let's just pretend they need.
Discuss almost anything you want.
True, you can, can you get is a question. Yes, so let's just pretend, though, they need a gallon per minute.
Mm-hmm.
For our growth, we would like to have 3 gallons per minute. That is something that is allowable to discuss with them,
Yes.
knowing that this could be something of ours in the
It's
future.
very common in Monroe, down in south, in Orange County. It's fairly common that there is if you seek a public water supply, it's very common that they propose a 4 times your use requirement.
4 times.
Well, you need to have there's a lot of complications go into this. You need to have what you actually need. You need to have the maximum daily demand, and then you need some quantity perhaps for fire flow. So they sort of say, okay, if you get 4 times, we're going to be at least guaranteed all of those things.
And George, just going, it'd be nice if we could incorporate what Jeff said into this language so that you talk about construction specifications, including but not limited to minimum system capacity. Minimum system capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important too, not only for the system to have the capacity at the outset, but have the capacity at the time you want to take it over. So you have to have them meeting the threshold twice, not just once.
It has to be proved at the time the takeover is
That
proposed.
it's still meeting that level.
Well, I mean, I think in some ways if we did something like that, it'd make me feel better because, it was the same thing, Jeff was saying, that I felt like, as developers come in to talk about potential projects and the problem with the municipal code as it is, and you sit there and it's reality. It's like, so somebody's going to develop a project, they get all their money out at the beginning when they develop it, now they're running it, something happens, it's our obligation to take it over, and all of a sudden we're incurring expenses, even though they have to pay us for the water, but we end up having to hire employees that we're going to have to pay their health insurance for the rest of their life, whatever.
can we get a
and
bond?
stuff, and it's like,
Can we
don't-
get a bond from them that would insure us in the event that they either abandon or they can't deliver to the capacity we specified it initially? So that way, if we're forced to take it over, we have their money to help us do it instead of taxpayer money.
Well, you would never, I should say never. The way a district is set up, it's not taxpayer money, it's not the general fund of a town that's financing.
But this is a transportation corporation, which is a private.
No, it's actually going to be, at Park Point, it would be a private water system operated by the occupant of Park Point.
But don't they
But
set up
you
a
also-
transportation corporation for the water?
Transportation Corporation is required if you're selling water off-site to another property.
Because they had that one document which had mentioned that they were
considering a transportation corporation, but it's not necessary.
So they were considering because they wanted to sell some of the water. And
I'm
now
not
they-
really sure why they put that in. It's quite possible, but
Okay.
I don't know that.
well, it's still not clear, because I thought when the system was originally being developed for Park Point specific, and I'm not talking about any particular project specific to this, because there are other projects that have come to us, and even have had preliminary conversations with the planning board.
Correct.
That fall under this, so this is a bigger issue than just Park Point.
Right.
But going back to Park Point, and I've never gotten clarity with the development of the water system, if it's for them alone, or I always thought, like the sewer system, there was excess capacity for the town to help, South Putt Corners and other projects, and so if it was being developed to have excess water for the town, that would maybe be why they were looking to do the transportation, whatever you call it, corporation.
Transportation corporation
So
for water.
can we impose that kind of requirement for them to post a bond in the event they can't meet their obligation?
Well, there is a way to do that through the process of the plan approval for any specific project. To do it by the definition would, I think, create a couple of concerns. One being, it may be possible that there would be different requirements depending upon the circumstances of a particular system and the town's interest in taking over the system, ensuring it could be there's a lot of fact-specific kind of issues that will arise. To put it in a definition and say, this is what it has to be, limits the flexibility that you have to deal with it. But in order for you to, A, approve the district, and B, enter into a takeover agreement, it will have to be satisfactory to the town. Otherwise, you won't do it. If you don't do it, and there's a public health issue with the operation of any, I don't want to limit this to Park Point, but if, for example, Park Point the system started to fail, and it created a public health issue, there would be an order of remedy. If there wasn't a remedy, then it would be closed down if it didn't meet public health standards.
Now,
So-
but is the water and sewer a separate entity?
We're
Both of the
talking about
infrastructure-
project specific?
Yeah.
I'm talking about if you're a separate entity and you go out of business, so what? You know what I mean?
If the water system went out of business.
Are you
That
talking,
would be
Kevin?
true if there was, that would be presumably a situation where there was a transportation corporation, which could own the assets, the wells, and be responsible for producing and selling, for instance, in a subdivision. You have 20 lots, there's a transportation corporation, typically the developer sets it up, he operates it while it doesn't cost him money, and if it starts to lose money, there become issues, lack of maintenance,
They can go out of business.
water problems, they can go out of business.
defunct, and then it forces the municipalities to take them over
Yes.
and spend money.
Right.
What's different about this particular circumstance with Park Point is that it is going to be, it's not a residential project. You're not turning someone out of their home if you shut them down. It's, it's not good because you'll have a number of buildings without tenants and without use, but you don't have the same set of human dynamics that you do when you try to tell homeowners.
But again, we're trying to develop this law, this definition, to meet many projects, because there's other, like there's a senior housing project that's going in that would like to come in, that has the same, face the same problem with our definition.
Understanding what municipal
And so when they came in to talk about this potential project, that was a big issue, but we can't do it because there's contradiction.
Right.
And then I think there's a third project, I think that might be also, I think it's more senior housing or whatever, that's also facing the same thing.
Are these
So-
other ones in the RV district?
I'm not sure what one of them is.
Right now, they're not, but at least the one I'm familiar with, there's a proposal to use the RV zoning you'll be also
It's
approving
further
the
up.
zone.
Further up.
So you
36, that's not-
actually have 3 points of control. You can determine whether or not to approve the zoning change.
Right.
You can determine whether or not to create a district and when to take it over. And that would be pursuant to a takeover agreement, which you would also approve.
Okay, so then, given all that you just told me, why are there problems?
There are problems because the RV district now says for one property that's in the RV district, there must be a municipal water supply. So at the time that particular project was proposed, the initial document said we're going to hook up to the village. There's a main right at the end of, at the village boundary, I think. And that turned out to have a set of issues with it.
Okay.
Are there any other, are there other parcels within the RV district that we have right now? Or is this the last parcel?
I believe this is the last
This is the last parcel. We looked at the map, and then it jumps up to the you got the apartments are there.
Well, I thought that the whole reason this was an RV was so that it would be contiguous with Bellaterra.
I think it was to be contiguous with
Right.
the village,
With the
too.
village.
But we
With
didn't
the-
want to skip this parcel, this 42-acre parcel, and then have Bellaterra be RV. So my memory is that we made the RV district from the village to Bellaterra. And this would be the only other parcel in that district. And I, for one, would not be in favor of creating any more RVs. I think it's an example of be careful what you wish for. I think what we're looking for is multi-use in the future.
Well, what's unfortunate is the PUD was almost created around the same time. That's really what we want. We really do
Right.
want a PUD and not an RV, but the senior housing that's just doing some preliminary would be further south on 32. And that, I don't know what we would zone that as to make it, right now it's not zoned.
I don't think so.
No, I know, it's
You know,
residential.
You could if you wished.
But do we have to go RV, or do we have other choices for that property? That would
Offhand,
also,
I'm not sure.
I'm
there's
just
I'm with you,
completely
Kitty.
opposed to creating zoning per project. I think what we need to do is look at,
yeah, let's write a master plan.
oh, how about a
How about
master
that?
plan? What a concept.
I think I have one.
Yeah, it's
Thank
not
you.
that size.
Yeah.
Since you're here, what would be the most efficient way to develop a municipal water supply, starting with this project? Because my thinking is, if you develop the capacity, then you can charge fairly lucrative hookup fees to people that want to come in and develop properties. And that can help.
Mindful, of course, that fees are for services. They're not in the nature of taxes. But,
I understand.
You have flexibility with your
Right,
price.
and I know that some towns will charge $1 million or $1.5 million as a hookup fee. It helps offset the cost of the system.
Well, the thing that helps us offset, well, there's a couple of things that can help offset the cost of the system. One is, eventually, the property owners that benefit by the system are paying for it.
Right.
So for example, if Park Point were to be taken over, if Park Point came in and said, we want to form a water district, we want the town, here's a plan, here's a water system, we want the town to construct it, and we'll pay for it through the taxation, and here's the schedule. And they showed you all the numbers and all work. You could create a district, you could cause the system to be constructed, it could initially start by serving Park Point, and because it is a town district, it can be extended or expanded as necessary to meet the needs of other property owners and promote the purpose of the comprehensive plan.
Keep going.
Well, that's really all I need to say, but the
But if you
point
want
of
to
this is
extend,
it's
if you
not
want
the
to extend,
taxpayers.
if you want to
Yes.
extend the line, you can get developer
Property owner
two,
petitions- property
developer
owner
two to
two
pay for that
petitions.
extension,
Yep,
right? And you can charge them a hookup fee.
yes.
Okay.
And you can negotiate, if someone comes in and says, I'd like to become part of the district, there is some opportunity for negotiation. You want to be part of the district now, we need to expand our capacity, how are you going to make that happen? And the conversation follows from that.
How does this change benefit Park Point?
It doesn't.
It's neutral.
It's neutral,
Well, it
except,
allows the project to happen.
no, the building inspector's determination did that. What this does is to some extent, it formalizes it, codifies it.
Okay.
So a judge would then be looking to say, well, look, the town board adopted the determination the building inspector made.
So basically, we're formalizing the fact that you can have a private system that meets
As
town
long as
specs.
there is the ability to take over,
Right.
it's constructed town
Right.
specifications, it can be taken over at the town's discretion when there is a failure of supply.
Has that process already occurred with Park Point?
I'm not sure.
Has any of this been done?
None of the, you're talking about the creation of the district?
Specifications, capacity, a written agreement, an offer, an irrevocable offer, has any of that been
No,
done?
and that typically would be conditions of an approval. Once the applicant knows there is, an end to the process, you would take care of the details and all those things would be done. There has been a general discussion about these elements being required. The applicant's preference would be to simply have a private system and control its own destiny, so to speak.
But this formalizes the fact that we can control how that agreement, how that relationship is
Yes.
structured.
Well, it simply declares it, essentially.
And so I'm clear on that, and that structure, that declaration hasn't occurred yet.
No.
Okay.
So I just want to understand the clarity. When Kitty said that this makes it able for them to proceed, you said no, the building inspector's determination.
She already determined that
She-
this could happen, and we're just rubber stamping it, making it clear that this is the town's intent.
Well, but we have to amend that.
But I,
part of the-
yeah, but I just want to,
That's what we're doing.
yeah, but I just want again for us and the public to understand what we're doing in a sense, is we're not changing or doing anything in any way that's showing favoritism to a particular project to help them get through the process. That's not what we're doing right now. What's happening is we have a code for the moment that contradicts itself, that puts the town in a position.
The applicant has expressed concern that if there's a requirement in the code that cannot be met and it's within the discretion of the town, that would invalidate the requirement, or if the town denies the ability to connect up, it would.
Right,
So-
so
Oh, but
you
it's
get
up to a
through,
lawyer.
you get through the whole process, you get approvals, and then they say, okay, we want to connect to the municipal water system. And you say, well, what water system?
Well, I mean, the applicant's basically.
No, but basically, at the end of the day, I just wanted to be really clear, because Kitty asked a very valid question, and people can really misunderstand what we're trying to do tonight, and because this is a volatile project, I want the record to be very, very, very
clear.
clear that this board tonight is not taking action to create a situation to allow this project to move forward, just because we want to allow this project to move forward. We're
That's
trying
why
to take
I asked
action.
about the structure.
Right, so what we're doing is we have a code right now that contradicts itself.
We have a code that's not clear, and there's been an interpretation of the code by the building inspector, and we're reaffirming that our interpretation is correct.
In essence.
Okay. And by doing that, we're actually protecting the town on many levels, A, from the ability to defend itself if there should be a lawsuit, because we didn't have it, and if for any reason this project was able to move forward without the town, because of the nonprofit status or whatever, what God knows what, the town has protection, so if this system should ever be developed, that the town controls the system, not the developer.
Could control the system.
Good control.
Well, the town could control the system versus the developer, and that's what we're doing, right?
You have the opportunity, but not the obligation.
Okay.
And that's what we want.
No, but I want it to be
Yeah.
clarified, understood, that, we're not doing anything to facilitate a process,
this
we're
will-
not doing anything to,
This makes no difference, from the standpoint of the Park Point project, there will be no difference whether or not this passes. They can proceed forward with the building inspector's determination, and
Now,
and
this
so,
go in.
and so this really helps us more,
and this
because
is
it
a
really
town board function versus a
Right,
planning board
right.
function.
So what this does is gives us more of the ability to drive the train versus somebody else with definitive
Yes.
goals that we are codifying in
Community
terms of.
goals.
Right,
And also gives a future structure should we look to develop more of the properties,
and just to clarify that
which
point.
is our goal. Our
There are-
community told us that's our goal.
In discussions with the applicant, my view is there are two scenarios I can envision in which this takeover agreement could be utilized. One is if the system exists, serving the public, people, the inhabitants of the project, and it's failing. It gives you the opportunity, but not the obligation, to take over the system so that it is providing adequate public safety. And that's important with this project because it's going to be sprinkled, unlike single-family residence, which basically needs water. You can go out and get bottled water, but you can't get enough pressure to run a sprinkler system from the supermarket. So this gives you the opportunity to take over on whatever terms you feel are appropriate, and it is not a taxpayer function. It is something which is charging the benefited properties. So if you determine it can't be fixed, it's too expensive, it's not in the public interest to take it over, you can decline to take it over, and then it becomes an issue in terms of whether or not the property has to
habitable.
be. Yeah, exactly. And that means, there's an incentive if they're getting rent, to put the rent in to fix the system, and so on.
I can't
But the-
imagine a scenario in which we have 750 residents without water and
If it's
sprinklers.
without water, you won't have 750
And,
residents.
well, if that scenario is on the horizon, you can bet they're all going to be sitting here saying to the town, bail us out.
That's why you get a bond.
Well, I thought we can't have a bond.
One of condition of approval.
Right.
Well, if you can develop, there's a couple of ways you can create financing. You can have a standby fund that comes out through the district, so there's some payment over time.
You gotta have an old escrow.
There's mechanisms which, if you're concerned, you can address.
When and how would we do that?
In negotiating the takeover agreement,
Yep.
you can either set up a mechanism then, or you can set up a contingent mechanism. So, for example, if there isn't adequate maintenance of the system in the course of a year, then they could be required to establish a bond and
But
fund
it
it.
feels like that's too late. I mean, it feels like going into this, that should be,
But see, I think he said it's never too late, because we have to have, we have the ability, under the statute, under the law,
Mhm.
to control the terms and conditions
Yes.
of that agreement. Now, here's my question, maybe I'll help you. what's the standard for the town under this scenario? I mean, how far can we go before it becomes arbitrary and capricious or anything like that?
When you don't have a reason, it's arbitrary.
Okay, so that's why we want to have reasons articulated so it's not considered arbitrary.
Right. I
When we
mean,
negotiate this, you see what I'm saying?
there are a couple of things to take into consideration with this. One is the nature of the water supply. I'm familiar with some water supplies which are in rock structures, some are sand and gravel aquifers. Those are the two general types that seem to exist around here. And those have different characteristics as far as maintaining water flow. So if the water flow is likely to be maintained by the nature of the water supply system, the real question becomes is whether the operator is operating it in an appropriate manner. My expectation would be as long as there is a economic basis to do so, they will. So having occupants at Park Point paying rent means the water
Cash flow to
operator.
maintain it. So you're right, it's two pieces.
But
One is the,
there
one is
could
the,
be something catastrophic that, earthquake or something that knocks out the
Right.
water system.
It's probably going to knock out a lot of things.
Right.
But the ultimate.
How about a drought where there's not going to be any more water left?
Yeah, the ultimate safeguard is you can not take it over. It can be determined that it is.
Right, but you've got 750, what I want is to be proactive, so that on the day, whatever this agreement is signed, there is a companion agreement that says, everybody at this table knows that in the event water supply is interrupted, there is money somewhere that the town will use to restore water.
There are ways you can do that.
Okay.
What I guess I'm cautious about is something which says, it's like your car. Your car's perfectly good. Do you need to get a towing agreement? When your car is 15 years old, it makes good sense maybe to have a towing agreement or have AAA. There's a point in which that transition takes place where somebody might say, well, it doesn't make sense to pay that for a brand new car, but for a 15-year-old car, we're going to have.
Except that we've never had a town water supply on this scale in that location.
Oh, true, but
We
there,
just don't know.
but there are, you haven't owned a car yet, but there are plenty of cars
you're covering
that set models.
an unanticipated event. Okay, so you have that, and what George is saying, a new car, you might have an unanticipated event with a new car. But the more likely scenario where you get into trouble is that over time, as the system deteriorates, they're not putting money back into the system to keep it upgraded. And then it wears down to a point now where it's not worth anything, not functioning, and then the town has to make a decision to take it over or not. And if they don't, the building inspector goes out and says, hey, listen, there's no water for this building, it's not habitable, and you have to close it down.
Whereas part of the advantage then too of us taking it over even sooner than later is then you're through user fees, because you can only charge fees to those getting the benefit, is that you're going to be collecting enough to maintain the system.
We're going to engage in an economic analysis to determine if it's worthwhile. And Kitty, if we have that insurance in a provision somehow, whether it's a bond or an escrow or something,
Right, that's what I'm
to
looking
cover
for.
those events, then we're going to feel secure about it.
Well, technically, in a sense, by codifying what the building inspector said, it's laying out in clarity if this should proceed to the level of developing a water system for a project that still has
Yeah.
not yet been improved.
The details come in the
Okay,
takeover agreement.
so then if it should ever get to the point where we have to negotiate this contract, which is what's in here that we're putting in, that we have to negotiate a contract to our specifications, then as that negotiation plays itself out, if it should ever happen, it plays itself out, and we're writing the contract, they've got to agree with us, and as long as we never sort of overstep something that could be defined as capricious and arbitrary, we're setting the terms. And by writing it the way you're writing it, makes that very clear.
Is that true?
Right?
Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I just want to be clear with them so they understand, anybody understands
Right.
that.
That's exactly the point, everybody.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And so that's what we're doing, is
So
basically
the-
protecting
I
ourselves.
think, I understand what you're saying, but I think just a little more detail would be helpful.
So do you want to do
The
more?
Positions that you've had, yeah, that's fine.
And then, see, we can, we will be revisiting this to negotiate, if we're interested, a takeover agreement. And we can actually negotiate that even prior
It's gotta be
to this,
prior.
to a shovel going in the ground.
Oh, nothing, no, you have to.
Prior.
any-
I mean, very prior.
If it ever gets to the
We can
point-
start next week if we want.
If we're ever getting to the point where we actually are doing this negotiation, we can, you know, we have to give the approval so we can drive the train in terms of what we want, and that becomes a negotiation.
So George, we will, assuming this project stays on track, we will be negotiating this contract prior to any groundbreaking.
Potentially any groundbreaking.
Yeah, I don't think the applicant wants to start breaking ground unless they know they have water.
Right, but so everybody knows that. Okay.
Okay.
So is there any other,
No, I think we covered.
you feel pretty comfortable that we have as much, it's as tight as we,
George has reassured me.
Let me just clarify the second scenario, which, that was the failure scenario,
Right.
where there's a need to take it over. The other one is where there's a desire to take it over.
Right.
What Jeff referred to earlier is if the town is establishing a water system, and this is determined to fit in with that water system, create a mechanism by which the town can acquire, absorb, or use the water facilities as part of a town system. That's a somewhat different scenario, certainly in the applicant's mind. In one scenario, they really don't have the choice. There's a public health emergency that has to be done, and I think they accede to that, and they don't expect it to happen. In that voluntary scenario where the town wants it, they have expressed the desire that there should be compensation for the system they built, because it's not given to them, it's something which the town wants. So the way that you would otherwise build a system, you would build, if they're building a $4 million thing, and if you wanted to accomplish that purpose, you would build a $4 million thing, except it would actually cost you $4.8 million because of the prevailing wage requirements. But you could construct that system, they could be in that district that you would create with the water system, and other people could join as well.
Well, under that scenario, though, you would want to have very specific capacity criteria so that you know that if you were required to pay something, you were getting your money's worth.
Yes.
but also that view of, well, we're building it and you want to get a benefit, so therefore we should be compensated for that benefit. Also could be turned around for the fact of, you're building a project, you need this, so what's the benefit to the community, and so why are we paying you for benefit? You know? So that's all part of negotiation.
It's like the Tonto phrase, what do you mean, weak people sabi? Because if you take the scenario where it's just the Park Point property, the district is created as a district, and a water system is built to accomplish the water supply purposes of that district by the town or by the applicant, and dedicated to it, sold to the town. The cost of that is X dollars. The way that's paid for is by a charge against the district. So the only people paying for that until that project is expanded are is Park Point.
Do we know if water is going to be included in the rent? I mean, I'm assuming it is.
As far as I know, yes.
But is that spelled out?
They won't have a little meter.
They're not separate,
They're
they're not metering each
So
unit.
they're
Swipe your
$700 a month includes water.
So
They're not
then,
How
metering
would
each
you
unit.
ever-
And they each have bathrooms.
How would you
I mean,
ever
It's going to be
put
a
that
tremendous
into a
amount of
municipal
water.
system?
the discussion to ask our attorney.
We would have to just have one big bill for the whole building,
Well, for a project like that, you would have a master meter,
right?
and it would tell them you sold them X dollars. and
Kind of like, it's what the
you charge.
village does with the university now. There's master meters. They don't meter each dormitory. There's
I
a
don't know what
couple.
they do for the town district. Do they have meters for each town district?
We have meters for each house.
Each one of our
Each user
users,
has
we don't
that.
have any,
There's not a master meter.
No.
there's very few industrial users on ours, so it's all individually metered. It's pretty simple.
Can,
But I think Park Point would want a master.
Yeah, they would, but I don't. I mean, you don't encourage water conservation if everybody leaves the water running for 10 minutes while they're on the telephone.
Well,
Can we require individual meters?
well, that's, we haven't got to the point of negotiating the contract, and I guess if we ever get to that point, we could decide.
Yes,
I'm just saying, we can't write this right now on the municipal water code.
Why not? Why can't our water code say that every unit shall have its own meter?
Well, I think this is an interpretation of a municipal water system.
Yes.
So what we're talking about right now is an interpretation
See,
of a municipal water system.
they can do
Can you
whatever they
define
want
that in as-
privately, but if we are going to take it over, part of the negotiation could be certain requirements, and this is what I was getting at.
Yeah, but
Well,
15 years from now, they're not going to go back in and
but-
meter the units.
But one way you can
Might
do
be
this
able
is, for example, you work out what's a reasonable per unit, per inhabitant usage, and that would be the threshold. And if you go above it, you charge a significant number more, and that's a disincentive to the
That's
property
true.
owner. And they're gonna go, they've made the point throughout this process, and I presume it's true, they manage the property. So they don't, they have the ability to go around and tell people, close the windows, turn off the water, and it presumably becomes a lease issue if you don't.
Now, George, and just what makes this conversation, and I'm sorry we went down this tangent, makes it interesting, is their Woodland Pond is now in front of the village board complaining of this very same thing. Now, they have not individually metered their units. They just have a master meter to their whole facility, and now the residents are upset that they're being hit with a larger bill. Reason being, the larger users, and it might, part of it would be, the pool probably doesn't use that much. If you dump a pool, obviously you have a large one. The kitchen, the gym showers, the extended care would use more water than an individual. So now they're having a problem with everyone paying. So for example, also if Park Point puts in a community room, puts in a pool, which was, or I don't know if that's still in the play, those could be very large users, and individual users could get penalized for that.
It may be something that's penalized among the Park Point inhabitants.
I'm using the term penalized because if you're an individual
Yeah,
user,
the
to
higher
us,
rates.
it would matter, but
But
what
if
it
you're an
did is...
individual user and you're getting those kind of charges, you have to go to the management and ask them to change it. If the management is getting the bill, they're going to be going to the users and say, cut down on what you're doing, or we're going to...
But they can't. I mean, they're not going to knock on 300 doors and say, your shower's been running for 10 minutes.
Well, look, I mean, ultimately,
Right?
let me just see, because I don't know if we're getting,
Well, I do want to finish that thought, and I would like, if we're going to add this to our code, particularly as, I mean, I'd forgotten, but Jeff reminds us that Woodland Pond is now complaining about its water rates, and they're on a master meter. We now have an example where that system doesn't work.
well, the question that I was going to ask, Kitty, was not denying that we have to do that.
Okay.
The question was going to be, when the time comes, if we ever should get to the point where we're negotiating the water district, the water system, the
Time
water
is
whatever.
now.
No.
I want to get it in here.
Well, but this is my question. It goes back, okay, because this is defining a municipal water system, I don't know if that concept of what Kitty's trying to get to could be included in the definition of the system, or it's when it comes time to negotiate a contract, you have to say to them, you will not get your water district if we go down that road unless it's individual
Well, I
metered.
think Katie's
That's
got
why
a
I'm
good
trying-
point, though.
But
is
can-
Well, I'm just asking how you do
So
it if it's
can we
in a
put it-
system, if it's in a
I
code.
would not suggest you put it into the definition, in part because a definition is a definition. It's not a specific
Implementation.
requirement.
But could the
Say-
definition include that each user you have to have the ability of each user to be metered? Or is that getting too
Well,
Is that digging out
you're-
minutia that's,
I think you,
dealing with the details of an agreement in a definition.
okay.
I think
No,
you want more flexibility here
then
and then less flexibility with your agreement. But Kitty,
I'm going to give this one last try. Why can't our definition say municipal water supply shall be a supply under which each user has a meter?
because you
Why
may
can't
not
that be our
want that. I
definition?
can't think of a scenario where you might not want that, but there could be you might not want that.
Well, in the scenarios, I think you don't really need it in the definition, but that would be an appropriate, you go through the details of how the system is going to be set up and operated as part of establishing a district, and you enforce those through
But
the.
wait,
So let me-
we
so
don't
let me-
have-
Kitty,
what
you do
if-
that in the agreement. You do it in the agreement.
Yeah, I think. it would
Well,
be-
Wait,
well,
wait,
here's
wait,
another,
wait,
here's
when
an-
did
here's
the
another reason.
agreement-
Wait,
The agreement, all this gives them the ability to develop a private system that falls under the definition, provided that they give us an offer of dedication, provided that it's built to the specs that we negotiate with them, provided that the town board is happy with this agreement and all the terms and conditions. So we have what we want for our protection.
and there are 7,
I just have the feeling they're going to come back and say, you didn't tell us soon enough. Too bad.
Well, we
We're
haven't
not
even,
doing it
no,
We haven't even got to
we
sit down
got to
and even,
start the negotiations, as you said, Kitty, the time is now, and so
Well,
that is
George,
correct.
George, can we add a phrase to this where I say including but not limited to minimum system capacity and water conservation?
Well, that's what I was
Well,
going to ask. I was going to get to that
yeah,
too.
that would be a requirement of the DEC order taking it.
Well, we already have water conservation requirements in our law that we did
We
that.
do.
We did that 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah,
Thanks
just
to,
trying
No, you could certainly say with the water.
we have conservation,
requirements
what,
of
yeah,
the-
Yeah.
we have low flow toilets, a requirement in all new construction,
that was a
water
New Paltz
safety.
High School project.
We did that
came and
3
did a
years ago.
presentation
Oh, really?
to us,
Yeah.
yeah.
That would
Passed
help,
along.
Kitty.
So then can you put in, so
I
then,
think George can do that, yeah.
Okay.
well, no,
I
but,
better make a note.
so
Okay.
George is going to put in the language that says
So we're gonna,
that is consistent with the New Paltz Conservation.
after the word town setting forth the, I just put construction specifications for such system.
How about including meters?
Including but not limited to minimum system capacity and water, meeting water conservation requirements as set forth in town law.
Well, I'm not concerned, I mean, they will meet the water conservation, but can we say the word meter in
Well,
that sentence?
that in the agreement.
Let me identify an issue with this then. This is a backup district. Now, if you're setting up a district and said, we want the district to go this way because we're going to take it over when you turn the key, that would be, I think, a rational thing to do. This is a backup system. It's possible that you may never take it over. But what that would require, if they were going to have to comply with this, is to install meters, so you could, if you took it over someday, meter 732 bedrooms.
Why
I don't- I'm
can't,
not-
why can't we require that any private system meet that requirement of the municipal code when it's built, that each unit be metered?
But I don't think it's in the
Well, let me ask
municipal
you a
code.
question, Kitty. What would it cost? It's 252 units. What would it cost to install meters in 252 units? Or have the ability to install a meter in 252 units?
Meter cost about $70, $80, a couple $100 a year,
Install.
But again, you know,
maybe more, maybe more.
I'm thinking like 250 is a common.
Okay, probably 250, yeah, 250 with everything, probably, okay, with labor and everything, probably 250 a unit,
So that would be,
250 by, what do you have?
Is it cheaper just to do that from the get-go?
Well, again, you can charge that cost back
but
to the
again,
users, because you can charge it back to
let's
the
go
water
back to the
district.
fact that if we ever find ourselves in the situation where we're negotiating the contract, we can negotiate the contract whatever we say. And if we say, you're building the system, we're going to allow, we're going to allow you to build the system, but this is the specifications, and the specification is every room has to be metered, that's our specification. We don't accept a contract without that specification. I understand what Kitty's trying to do is we're not going to always be here, and so anything in the future, it's again, like with the contract negotiations with me and Jeff today, it was like, all I kept saying was, it's like, I want clarity, 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 so there's no, it's like the next supervisor at town board could do this for one employee and do that for another employee. It's very defined what you're allowed to do, and there's no interpretation. And so I understand what Kitty's trying to do. The question is how to do it in a legal way within a code,
Well, and
a definition.
I'm thinking if it's not relatively expensive to do, then asking them to do it in the agreement is not unreasonable.
Of course it's not.
I don't think it's
Okay.
cost prohibitive at all.
Then we're going to be.
I think we'll be fine in the agreement.
So we're not going to be in the situation where they're saying, it's not in your definition, you can't make us do it
The definition
later.
really doesn't
Okay.
drive those sorts
Because
of.
we also may be
Okay.
having
The
a
definitions in the
conversation during this
contract.
negotiation also of us wanting the system too.
Well-
Potentially that could come up too.
Yeah.
So then though I think the conversation is going to encompass a lot, and this would be a low-ticket item on it.
Well, again, in the definition, it says they have to negotiate a contract. By saying they have to negotiate a contract, that gives us the leverage of, well, this is the contract,
Okay.
and this is what's important in the contract, and you don't get a contract unless you meet these specifications. Okay?
Well,
And
it's
just-
rational.
Right, as long as it's rational, sure, of course. I mean, if we say we want the water to be Kool-Aid,
So we should make a memo to ourselves, because this
I
could
don't think we'll
be
forget this.
years. Well, we may not be. I
That's true, we might all
certainly
not
won't
be.
be
Well,
here.
When would this,
Kevin's the only one who's definitely going to be here.
when would, we're all going to be here. Kitty, you'll still be here. You'll be in the audience.
Hey, Katie, we're going to I'm going to go pick her up every night. Oh, yeah.
You'll be watching on your phone and dialing in.
Yes,
Well,
probably.
because we're all getting along, so she might choose to write
Kevin,
again.
George, when would this come up? In 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months?
It's a little hard to know for certain, but
Ballpark.
it's possible 6 months.
Okay, all right.
Okay, and also, I
Not
mean,
before 6 months.
you don't think before 6 months?
Not
Okay,
to-
great.
with that.
Because then maybe Kitty and I won't be here. So we'll have to come to the board meeting and remind people
Right.
of what we wanted. Just going back to your.
I will come back with that.
Going to your point, Jeff, though, we are right now, we authorized our engineer to look at creating a water system for the town. We are working on it, things are happening, and so probably by the time we ever get to this, if this should become a reality, I think it might fit into a bigger picture, and we'll be well on our way of understanding what the bigger picture is. And so a lot's going to be hopefully changing within the next couple of weeks, because things are happening, and meetings are happening, and conversations are happening. And so this might become a part of a bigger discussion, so I think we could feel comfortable that we'll know what we're doing by the time we get there.
Exciting.
And you'll be taking this right
So-
away.
So we're finished with that, right?
So does that mean we should adopt the,
Yeah.
No.
so you want to make a motion?
Well, do we
So-
want to
so
do
Or
that?
do you want to wait till you?
What I
Should he read-
what I will do is put it into local law
Okay.
form, give you the necessary
Okay,
forms.
and then we'll go from there.
seeker,
Thank you,
And
George.
that
Okay.
can take place.
So-
So we're
While
basically
you're
authorizing you to, well, we're not even, we haven't gotten to the other stuff.
I know.
Okay, but we're authorizing George to proceed
Yes.
to codify into a local law the definition as defined by our building inspector.
Okay.
And do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motions are carried. Okay, Kitty.
So, we're in need of some advice on how and when we can inform the Ulster County Industrial Development Agency about our feelings about the proposed pilot. We have, Wilmerite did provide us with a copy of the section of their draft FEIS on the fiscal impact analysis. Is this it?
This is it,
That's
yes.
just the fiscal impact
That's the
analysis.
answer.
yeah.
That's the,
So-
and then this is the,
I did get this, George, so no point.
I have 4 notebooks at home now. Of just what I was saying.
So, I mean, I've been plodding through it, and then suddenly this light bulb went off, and and then I turned it off again. But I'm trying to understand,
Observing, huh?
like, for the town board to go to the IDA, how much would we be expected to rely on the FEIS? And how much would we be expected to use this data to, I guess, basically inform the IDA that since Wilmite first approached the town board, Tony Hokinson was supervisor, December, I think, in 2010 or something. In my personal opinion, I'm still having a hard time finding out how this project meets any of the basic criteria for an IDA-eligible pilot.
Because they added dormitories.
They
That's
did, and so that's another, it's now an eligible category.
Yes.
It's an eligible category.
The IDA changed.
IDA.
The
changed-
county
The
idea.
county IDA
Yeah.
changed their policy to allow for dormitories to,
In order to facilitate,
Park Point.
well,
And
That's
so
it.
here- here-
Right.
here-
Well,
okay,
that-
we
I
need
just
to
have to-
back
I just
up
have to stop for a
to
second because-
Exactly a year ago.
go ahead.
Exactly a year ago, we got a letter from the IDA inviting us to a public hearing in which they said they were going to do this bad thing. We asked Susan to go. She said she would go, and then they canceled
It
and
was, it was
rescheduled.
actually 8 o'clock in the morning. I called them up to say that I would be coming and that they should be allowing me to speak. And then I got a phone call that basically said it was canceled. And then I never got a phone call telling me it was rescheduled.
Right.
2 days
So-
later.
Right, so I've got the minutes of that meeting, which are very ambiguous because they say the motion was withdrawn, the motion was passed. Those are the two consecutive. So it's in there, it's an eligible category now. So one thing I would like to ask is, you're going to a supervisors meeting next week.
Well, it's an emergency meeting based on the sales tax. I don't know what's happening
Apparently,
now.
not a single town supervisor attended that public hearing based on their minutes, which suggests to me that they were planning to go on the night that the letter invited them to come on that morning, and then they rescheduled the meeting. And, the fact that not a single town supervisor was there of public comment suggests to me that maybe we should go back and say, we'd like you to reconsider adding that category.
Well,
But even without the special addition of a category at the request of an applicant, which I think is very shady. From what I remember about IDAs, one of the main criteria is there any danger that this project will build somewhere else? Must we give these tax incentives? Pardon?
But for the pilot, will it go somewhere?
Right.
Well, no, I mean, there's no possibility that it would go somewhere else, in other words, find another land. What this project would do is, they had said it very early on, it was referred to as the nuclear option, which is they will just take the project and give it all over to the
Right.
state. And then everyone, it just
how can
becomes.
they give it to the state if they spend
Well-
private money?
Well, that's
That's a whole
that's
other-
the threat.
The-
But for the purposes
It
of
would-
the
No,
IDA,
They would work as a
it's-
non-for-profit.
Because
The state does buy land from not-for-profits all the time.
So it would just become,
But it has to be offered.
they would become a
It's part of a
non-for-profit.
spending.
no, it's
and
exactly the way the
It wouldn't
bond
happen this year.
operates.
It takes a few years to line up the money.
No, but I think,
It would happen.
No, the SUNY Goshoff
right,
reports.
the non-for-profit owns the property. The not-for-profit
Owns the
book.
land.
The not-for-profit owns the land,
The improvements will be owned privately, correct?
understood.
That's
Okay,
the current
but this is where
There's
the
two
fine line, there's like the fine line in the sense, the nonprofit owns it. I'm going to just step back for a second with the medical facility, Dr. Meshi. When Dr. Meshi was building his medical facility, originally the whole project was a not-for-profit. Dr. Meshi was building Mid-Hudson Health Facility on his own. It was all off the tax rolls. Because he wanted to build another facility in Ellenville and didn't want the expense on his balance sheet because he had to borrow money for Ellenville, what he did was at that point decided that he'd bring in First Columbia. They would build it, but they were for a for-profit, and they went for an IDA to get it off his balance sheet. So originally it was all tax-free. Because they went to the IDA, now it gave the community the ability to at least negotiate a pilot, which is how we got the community center. But we started with nothing and would have had nothing. So I think it's a similar situation where it's owned by a not-for-profit. They've created a situation to have a for-profit build it for them. The for-profit's asking for a pilot, okay? However, there's always that threat, we can always take the chance and see if it happens, but there's always the threat that if we don't do something, and not what it is, we're not giving away the store by any means whatsoever, but could they, at the end of the day, then figure out how they get it built with it all being not-for-profit, and we're just out of the picture completely?
Well, let me ask you a question.
And that's one of the things.
So, in order to do that, maybe you will know the answer to these questions.
And George and I talked about that before you came tonight,
So-
trust me.
They're borrowing money to build the project and putting in their own money as well, I would imagine. Do you
Now
know
you're
what-
talking about Wilmerite.
Yes. Do you know what the actual cost of construction is off the top of your head?
The estimated cost that was in the IDA application is about 50 million.
50 million? And out of the 50 million, do you know what part they're borrowing?
That I don't.
Okay, so let's just make some assumptions just for discussion purposes. Let's say they have to borrow 40 million. So obviously, if they can establish that their cash flow can satisfy debt service and expense, let's assume they can establish that. Now, if they go to New York State and say, we want to sell this property to you, are they in a better position with the state of New York to take it over because of the cash flow? Obviously, it would appear yes. Yes?
I'm not sure what, would the state of, how
No,
would the cash flow?
so see, the
affect New
state,
York
it wouldn't become a state project. This would become a SUNY foundation project.
Right.
This would become a foundation project.
Which is a not-for-profit.
Yes.
It's a not-for-profit. So then Wilmerite would,
So,
for profit,
Where
build
does,
it.
where does the not-for-profit get the money to buy?
They don't need to. They would contract.
It would be exactly
No,
the
they
way
still
it
have
is.
to pay for the...
No, the thing is, what Kevin's trying to figure out is the mechanism, the elephant in the room is the fact that it's not-for-profit. And could this project turn into a complete not-for-profit? We get completely taken out of the picture. The town gets nothing. There's no pilot. There's no anything. We're completely out of the picture. And that's the fine line of trying to understand.
Well,
How do
Wilmerite's,
they-
That's what you're trying to
Well,
get to.
Wilmerite-
is-
Trying to get to, let's
Right,
flesh
that's
that
what
out.
Kevin's
well,
trying to.
Wilmerite's ability to get access to funding is not an issue
No, I'm
whatsoever.
assuming they have the funding,
They-
but
they
Yeah,
have
now,
that's not the problem.
now they have a project with
Right.
debt, but it has cash flow.
Yes.
So does the not-for-profit have to go to a
Well-
public source for funding, or do
It-
they have to get private funding?
I think they could get funded by whomever.
They would do
Can
it
they assume
exactly
the
way
IDA
Woodland
loan?
Pond. They would do it exactly the way Woodland
Can
Pond
they
did it.
assume the IDA loan?
Well, there's no IDA loan that's proposed. So Wilmerite's going to do market financing.
They're going to do
finance.
market financing. They're going to do
So-
commercial financing.
Right. Now, one could surmise a scenario in which Wilmerite and the foundation engage in a agreement between themselves. Wilmerite will build it, construct it, they'll get a fee instead of the right to control and receive all the rents, or they'll get some deal with respect for their services. And the foundation will still own it, they will still nominally control it. Wilmerite will operate it for them, or get paid something to do that.
But the
So
not-for-profit...
that's how they could do it?
Wait a
That's-
second, the not-for-profit
Yes.
that then takes, under the first scenario, there's a land lease and improvements that are owned by another entity, which is a for-profit entity.
Right.
Under the second scenario, the not-for-profit owns the land and the improvements, but pays the builder a fee. Okay? So how does the not-for-profit get the financing to pay the developer for the construction?
We go to a lender and say, we have this agreement, this is our operator, or manager, or whatever it turns out to be. It's Wilmerite, we have experience doing this, it's our project, but it's gonna look just like Park Point, Rochester, or whatever. And here's the cash flow and the balance.
So
would
it's the
be-
cash flow, see?
It would be exactly the same process except that,
It's tax
so, well, I mean, New Life or Kingston Regional Health is not-for-profit.
Right.
Right? I mean, we see these all the time, and they still go for
How can a not-for-profit
private.
operate a for-profit, right, real estate project?
They
Because
hire a
it's,
manager.
well, that's how they would literally operate it, but they would do it, the Council for the Foundation has said among the purposes are to create student housing. And presumably that would extend to faculty and staff housing, to serve the purposes, overall purposes of the
Actually,
university.
they're
it's
doing
not
is-
in their mission statement.
What they're
It's
doing.
not there, but it is not, it's not inconsistent with it.
But what they're doing is they're kind of usurping the function of the university.
They could, if they opened up an apartment complex there and rented it to anyone and used the income to support the function of the foundation, that would be an IRS question in the first case as to whether it's unrelated business income or not. But it's going to the foundation purpose, but it's not, the actual activity isn't the function of the entity. But if it's student housing, and
But this is not student housing in the normal sense when you look at it. I mean, they say it's student housing.
well, it's going to be limited to students.
Listen,
Well-
it's housing where you're generating about $2,100 a month per unit.
Which, that's true. And if
$2,100 per month.
if the entire
$6 million a year.
operation was controlled and operated by the foundation, we created the entity and they created the ability to do this and was providing housing for SUNY students,
Wouldn't
Well-
you think then the cost would be somewhere around $1,200 a month?
depends on what they want to accomplish.
Yeah, I think
I mean-
a not-for-profit has a very different threshold for how much income they can collect that is not directly supportive of their mission. And you know, the 800-pound gorilla that Susan is talking about is, we all know that this project could be withdrawn and resubmitted by the SUNY New Paltz Foundation as their nonprofit tax-exempt dormitory housing. That is the stick
But
that's
they
out
don't
there.
want to do that because they're good neighbors?
I think that's
No,
true.
well,
I do think that's true.
Maybe there's an element of that I've heard, and I suspect there's just difficulty in
But can I ask you a question, George?
Accomplishing.
They've done their cash flow analysis for this project. Have they shared their income, their income statements with anybody, their pro formas with
Yeah,
anybody?
they're
That's
in
my
the
knowledge.
FEIS. I mean,
Okay,
I
so
don't know what they're saying.
Here's my
but-
question.
there's,
You know, it's like anything else. They have the information they haven't shared with us yet. And they're holding all the cards. I don't know why they can't say, here's the information, this is the money we're going to make, and we're going to share that with you by paying X amount of dollars. Because I'm of the opinion that if it's jammed down our throats, like the state is jamming down our throats with these unfunded mandates, and now our own representatives are taking sales tax away from us, and now we have our local people forming not-for-profits to get a benefit, I'm telling you, there's going to be some lawsuits by local municipalities against these people because it's all being jammed down on us. I mean, if you think about it, and then the analysis in this report, and I like the project, I do, but this analysis is ridiculous. When you read through it, the assumptions that are made, and I can go through this with
we're
you.
talking about the fiscal,
But
It's
here's my
ridiculous.
question. I mean,
I just want
Wait, let-
that is going to be
let-
reviewed by a
right,
consultant.
if the
for
town board
For the
wants to
The
go
planning
on the
board hired.
record, if the town board wants to go on the record to the IDA sooner rather than later, just to give Wilma Wright a heads up about what we're thinking, I don't see anything that's changed in the FEIS that, except that the numbers are far more in the sense that the town is going to incur far higher expenses. But the basic criteria that I was going back to before, is this project going to go anywhere else if it were not for the pilot? I think the answer is no. Will this project create economic development? They say it will create 215 temporary construction jobs, 18 months, they're gone. All the community support, the only community support is from, understandably, SUNY New Paltz staff and faculty saying they support the housing project. There is not one statement, even from the SUNY faculty and staff, saying we support this being a tax-free project. So there are pages and pages of comments from the public saying we have no objection to the housing part of this, but we want it to pay the same taxes that everybody else is paying. And that's what we see for page after page in the public comment that is part of the FEIS. And community support is a factor that the IDA weighs. So it feels to me that the town board should begin to prepare a statement to the IDA saying, we see absolutely no basis for a pilot.
Which you could do. There's no prohibition against doing that.
What I don't understand
But
is
it-
why there isn't better dialogue right now between the town and the project developer about what would be fair right now. I mean, why do we have to engage in this cat and mouse game where we don't know where we stand right up to the end, and by the time the end comes, somebody's not going to be happy and there's going to be a lawsuit. There's going to be a lawsuit. And that makes no sense for anybody. The bottom line is, when I read this, it appears that somebody is using this analysis to show that really having 732 new people in town doesn't impose a significant additional cost to the community. Okay, so I should engage in the same analysis for my house. I should be able to say to the community, I don't get water and sewer. I don't get all these other services that other people get. So therefore, my house has less of a significant impact on the community than maybe somebody else somewhere else. All that thinking, all that analysis is flawed because really when you think about the community, it's the $11.7 million that it costs to run the whole show. Now, that's this year. So next year, it might be 12.5 and then 15 and then 17. So they're not thinking about how we fund future cost increases going forward. They're saying, oh, let's just look at what this project might cost the town from a dollars and cents perspective, not what the community costs are overall.
Actually, they did put in 3% inflation in there.
Yeah, but that's ridiculous.
And, well, because they start with such
They
ridiculously low
assume
numbers.
that the police budget is 1.9 instead of 3.7 because they're not including the retirement costs, the medical insurance, and all that other stuff, which is going to be $5 million 5 years from now. Okay? So, back to this analysis. Why don't we look at it this way? There's 14,000 people in the town and the village.
7,000 are students.
Let's say that the budget, let's just hypothetically is, I don't know, $14 million. That's $1,000 a person. There's 732 new people coming to town. We should have $732,000 of additional revenue. Or you say, okay, what percent is that 732 of the population? It's the same analysis. It's a 5% increase. So 5% of that 14 million is 700,000 again. So why is it that certain people that come into the community feel that they don't have to pay at the same rate that everybody else has to pay? I don't get it.
Because there's a system in place that allows them to take
That
advantage.
system does not benefit.
No, I agree.
Here's
No,
where I'm
no,
going
I
at.
agree with you
That
wholeheartedly. I'm
system-
just saying there's a system that allows them
talk
to
about
do
the
it.
system.
That's why they do it.
Let's talk about the system.
The broken system that screws all of us?
The system is a county-based system
No,
Enabled
it's state.
by the state.
Enabled by the
enabled by the
state.
state that imposes the ultimate burden
On the local taxpayer. Absolutely.
And that is not going to happen anymore as long as I sit on this board. I'm telling
So
you.
none of us disagree with you, Kevin,
We all agree.
although the governor did come down and make it a tax-free zone, so.
Oh, I realize that.
So don't worry about that.
So it's
But
going
I
farther.
think, to get back to Kitty's question is,
Of which I registered,
I think everyone here agrees at this table, that we all agree that there's a lot of flaws still. I still see a lot of flaws in this, and Kevin brought up the police, the
and the
re-
fiscal effect, yeah.
the rescue squad budget also, they use what we pay, not what their total
just-
budget
just
is.
put this
But
all-
when do we approach the IDA?
no, let me, go ahead. You have, and then I
There
have
are
a
2 points
suggestion.
at which, or 3 points at which you approach the idea, if you wish. One is the issue that Kitty raised, whether or not this meets the requirements.
Right.
You can raise that at any point, and presumably sooner is better. Say, we looked at your criteria, we looked at your policy, we looked at the circumstances, and we don't think there's any fit whatsoever. You can put that into the record at any point. The IDA is, I was looking at this today, and I first thought, well, if the IDA says no, let them go and say no now. Why go through the entire process?
Exactly.
However, the secret regulations require that any involved agency, before it approves, modifications, or disapproves an action, have the FEIS completed. So until the secret process plays out, the IDA can't even disapprove. However, that's to take the final action. If they look at your points and they agree with those points and they say to the applicant, this process concludes, we don't see any way we're going to be able to do anything other than disapprove, because you don't meet the fundamental criteria. That's a conversation. They're not taking the action, but the applicant will have a pretty clear understanding of what the outcome is going to be. And if you're going through an entire process under one surmise, and you know it's going to be different at the end, you're going to change the way you're dealing with that process. I believe that would be a rational way to go through this. And if the IDA were to take that, to agree with you, and take that position, and say, you've given us all the information, we just don't see it. That's a threshold question. If they get over that threshold, and the IDA says, well, there's a lot of problems, it's not perfect, it doesn't really fit, whatever, but we'll go through and we'll figure it out, and we'll look at whatever information the town provides about the impact and see how much of a pilot you could be entitled to if you qualify.
And that's using their scoring system?
Well,
Yes.
that's the
Yeah.
problem. They've created this new category of 450 for one unit and 750 for the faculty housing.
Interesting.
Well, actually, I talked to Marge Gallagher today because when I called George to talk about all this, to sort of understand where we can and can't go, which was some of the questions you're saying, like, did I just say to the IDA right now, we're not willing to accept a pilot, but, so George had told me that there was this flow chart that had been put out, so let's just do that real quick, and then I'll tell you what Marge Gallagher told me today when I called her after talking to George to get this, when George suggested I get, that's for you, did I give you the wrong one? Did you see that today? That's an article in the Times Herald Record, it was today's editorial in the Times Herald Record, saying that every investment deserves a tax break, because Woodbury
Not every.
what did I say? Every?
Keyword. Yeah, you said
Oh,
every.
no, not every investment deserves a tax break, and this has to do with Woodbury Commons, that it's expanding, but they want a tax break. They're expanding because they're so successful, but yet they want a tax break.
I thought retail and grocery and housing, I guess retail is allowed, but supermarkets and housing were not eligible for IDA.
I don't know
Not
if you
straight
can
up
hold this up to
housing,
the
but
camera.
there
You think I can
are
hold this up to the camera?
work for
No, there's no, but retail gets it all the
See
time.
if I don't know if you can,
They always do, yeah.
just a quick, I don't know if you can show what this is. or it's probably not possible, unless I go up and hold it to you. What it is, it's a flow chart, it's on the Ulster County Industrial Development Agency website, and when you go onto their website, there's something about pilots, and it's under, not bonds, it's under lease buybacks, lease buyouts. It's under, if you go to the website and you go to forms and something, then on the left side, it says bonds, and it says lease buyouts. And if you go into lease buyouts, it has a flow chart for the process. And what I was told today is they are still in the draft and file application in the IDA process. They have not gone to the public hearing yet.
Right.
So that's where they are. So they're only in the
I
draft and
just
file.
want to point out on this wonderful form, and everything on the IDA website is for the applicant. There's no place on the IDA website that tells us where, when, and what we should be doing as elected officials. It's all, we will help you get your project off the tax rolls, and here's how. And that's what the entire website is devoted to. It's
Well, I
frustrating.
did bring a couple of sections from the May meeting minutes and the February meeting minutes. And I thought those would be helpful because some representatives, no, not representatives, some town residents were at both meetings
Right.
and expressed their interest in finding out how the process would work and when opportunity will be provided for the town to participate in, as well as themselves. And I think that helped the conversation reflects that the IDA does have concerns and does want to hear what the town concerns are. And that formally becomes part of the record when they have their public hearing. That is the point at which there is an obligation on their part to hear comments.
Right.
But I think if you look at the discussion in the minutes, there is a fair amount of
I've been
interplay.
reading them, and I'm very, but we're also getting a lot of emails from our constituents saying, why aren't you there? Where is the town board? When are you going to start speaking up on this?
There is-
Well, we did send them a letter that we worked on extensively.
But, yes, and that was basically our comments to the planning board, and
Right.
and they got them. But
Okay.
I am concerned that what happens is that by the time you get to the public hearing, the applicant is
So far down the
so
road.
invested in this project, and it doesn't seem fair not to give them or the IDA a heads up about our concerns about this.
There's nothing which prevents you from doing that. There is nothing technical, I mean, the IDA can certainly receive information at any time, at any meeting. Just the way they're receiving comment from
Okay, but-
individual
I
residents.
think we should have a discussion at some point, maybe in executive session or something. And I'll leave it up to you to discuss the town strategy.
Well, I don't, if it's not contract negotiation, personnel, I mean, it's,
Well, it could be
I don't know.
consultation with our attorney.
well, that's possible. I mean, I'm just saying, if that was to happen, it has to be done in a way where it's
I'm just thinking-
appropriate for executive
Right,
session.
I know, and I'm sure that we have a category that we fall into,
Well,
but I think we should.
okay, well, I think there are some things we could talk about tonight without having to go into executive session that sort of gets to where you might want to go,
Maybe-
because I have a possible idea. When I called up to the county today to get the copy of this flow chart for us tonight, let's go back to the fact that it's a sliding scale of the payment per unit, okay? So what I was told, it is between $450 and $750 per unit, okay? What I was told today was, A, we should know that a precedent has been set, because what Park Point is saying is that it was sort of like, it didn't matter that there were 4 rooms with 2 beds each, for a total of,
There's 4 bedroom
232.
units.
I know,
Right,
with
they're
4
saying
bedrooms
that a
each.
four-bedroom unit is one
There
unit.
is a 4-bedroom unit.
Right, okay, I know,
Just
so what I'm trying to.
comparable to a single-family house.
I know, so what I want to know is that, what I'm trying to say is that what they're saying is precedent was set, okay, because of Golden Hill, because Golden Hill went with the new owners to basically get an IDA. And so, which we could debate whether they needed an IDA either, but that's beside the point. Golden Hill went to get an IDA, and in the IDA negotiations, they defined as a unit 2 bedrooms in 1 room.
Right.
So it's 2 bedrooms, 1 room, that's the precedent now. So therefore, they're
2
saying.
beds in 1,
2 beds in 1 room,
not 2 bedrooms in 1.
right, whatever, 2 beds in 1 room now defines a unit that has to be paid a fee.
That's a dormitory unit.
Right, and that's how they're defining it, okay? Which Park Point wasn't defining it, they were looking at it from a different perspective.
Well,
So,
Beds in one room?
Here's a,
2 beds in 1 room, like a dormitory.
Here's
A
a-
dormitory, 2
There are 4
beds in 1 room,
rooms.
4 rooms, so that would mean that each room could
none
be
of these
assessed.
rooms has more than 1 bed.
that's a 4-bedroom
It's,
unit.
they don't have 2 beds per unit. It's
There's
one,
four
it's one
separate-
bed per bedroom. They don't
This is
do
a-
2 beds per bedroom.
Right.
Each
This is
bed- each
called a
bedroom-
4-bedroom
They
unit.
don't put 2 beds per, they don't put 2 beds per room. Every bed,
Then it
every
probably
room
should be
will only
four
have.
units.
It's
That's
4
what
It is,
we
it's a
would-
4-bedroom, it's a
But
four-bedroom.
they're calling this a
Unit.
4-bedroom unit.
I
Right.
see,
Well, there's
yes, well-
there's units and there's units and there's units.
And what they do,
Right.
Susan, they
Units.
don't have any plans at all that have 2 bedrooms
Okay.
per, and in fact, it's a violation of the lease if you add an additional tenant
Okay.
to your bedroom.
Well, what she was trying to say, regardless of that, she was just saying that was a precedent that got, okay, but what she was saying was that it's actually between 450 and 750, but if we as a community believe the impact of this project on the community with all the expenses, whatever, we could say, we really believe it's $900 a unit, this is how we're defining units, that we, I'm just letting you know that this is what I was told by the county today, that you don't have, you could say we want the upper end, and we don't even believe the upper end in matches. We believe that it should even be more.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So when you're talking about a unit, you're talking about, and you think about a dormitory unit, you're thinking about 1 room shared by 2 students, correct?
Right.
And that
And that's what
precedent
is-
was the nursing home?
Yes.
So they had 1 bedroom with 2 beds in it.
1 room with 2 beds.
How many bathrooms were in that unit?
We didn't get into that.
How many bathrooms?
Because-
One
I just want to
bathroom.
point out, if you look at the minutes from March, from May,
Yep.
page, I think, 5 and 6, there is discussion about units. It discusses Park Point. It says, in that case, it says, the minutes would say, each 1 bedroom is 1 unit. So there, I think there are 732 bedrooms.
So it doesn't matter if it's 1 bed or 2 beds, they're defining each bedroom as a unit.
It is.
You know what,
what's
we're getting very
interesting-
close to your number. If we go
3/4 of the way there.
658,000 a year.
Getting close.
Right. And then,
That's
okay.
still low.
No, it's still low, but I'm just saying, so I'm saying that, now that's at the 750 number, right?
Well,
Kitty,
Let me do it again.
do it at 750.
We have 700, how many units are they saying? 250?
The,
But we're not, if we,
there's 732 bedrooms. There's the
so are
section.
we counting each
so
bedroom
you
as a
don't want to
unit?
say,
Yes.
see, they're saying a unit can be a 4-bedroom, 2-bath.
Right.
So there's 252. We want to ignore the characterization of units and focus on bedrooms.
Yeah.
And then you add a little bit more for bathrooms.
Okay, so 732 units times 900, $658,800.
So the spread, depending, if the IDA has a range up to 750, then the spread between 900.
And that money
But
is then
Marge
split
is
between
saying-
the school district, the town, and the county?
Yeah.
That's still not enough.
Well, that's also.
Well, that's only the
subject to
beginning.
negotiation.
But that's only the beginning, Kevin. That doesn't mean that you can't, as you, within,
You see, I didn't really understand until recently, like
Uh-huh.
today, what a unit really was, because I was
Right.
asking Kelly. And then I looked at this floor plan, I said, wow, it's really beautiful. I mean, this is a great concept for students. But can you imagine what we would assess a 4-bedroom, 2-bath condominium unit for in this town? I mean, what do you think it would sell for?
We know exactly. I mean, I think they're at 225.
This is 4 bedrooms. I don't even think we have any 4
Oh,
bedrooms.
right.
I mean, it's 1,125 square feet.
Wow.
Well, I mean, obviously, that only leads to being able to argue to the IDA that your value of 450 to 750 based on 2 bedrooms in 1 room is fine, but this far exceeds that definition, and so therefore, your 50 to 750 does not, in any way, shape, or form, is a fair cost to assess for a, quote, payment in lieu of taxes for that.
And just because they choose to put 1 bed in a room that could accommodate 2 is not our problem.
No. The other thing with the pilot is that in discussions with the former chairman, he explained
Former
that,
chairman,
David O'Halloran?
the former chairman of the IDA.
Yes.
I wasn't sure if you meant the former
No,
chairman of the
no,
planning
the former
board.
chairman of the IDA. He explained that the pilot can be negotiated, the allocation between taxing jurisdictions can be negotiated with the consent of all parties. So if the town is providing the bulk of the services and therefore incurs the cost and therefore has at least a claim to payment of most of the IDA pilot payment, if the parties all agree. Normally,
But
the
that's
school
if they
district
agree,
is,
that's if they agree, and the school district might,
normally, normally the school district would have its own services, and if it was a residential project, they would have more than the town. And that's why those numbers are
That,
set.
one of the problems I'm having though too, and trying to understand, on top of us, trying to grasp the project, which is one whole thing, and I've been trying to understand more about the IDA. If you look at, about the only recourse you have is the clawback provisions they have. The problem being is, there really is no clawback provision for something costing you more. So the provisions they have, one of the clawback provisions, so for example, would be, I'm going to produce 10 jobs, I only produce 5 jobs. A 50% clawback provision. Now, the negotiations then come, do you go back to day one, do you go, is there a
Yeah.
percentage? Now, let's just say we go, we sit here and we say, because we really don't know, you're going to get 100 ambulance, you're going to get 100 police calls in a year, and we value those 100 police calls at $50,000. It turns out I get 300 police calls, it now costs me 100, and I'm just making these numbers up, it's directional, cost me $150,000. I can't find any provisions or any examples of where you can claw back your pilot because of that.
I don't think they've encountered this yet, but in the course of the FEIS, we're going to try and identify the assumptions that have been made, so that if we anticipate the police calls will be 100, we're going to state that. And based on that, we're going to estimate the cost based on experience. And all those numbers will be added up, and that's what we anticipate the cost will be. What we need to make sure, and I believe it's possible, although maybe not probable, but it's certainly possible, we can come to agreement with the applicant that they'll pay for the costs that are actually incurred. If you get 300 calls, that could be increased beyond the assumptions in future years.
I like this section in here where they talk about the fact that the police calls will be discounted because these students already are here in the community during the day,
During the day.
and because the statistics already account for them being here during the day, that they then discount the number of calls that can go to the new units because they're already here. They use that analysis to cut down on the number of calls, and I thought that was ridiculous. And in addition,
Yes, the amount of drunks wandering out of P&G's at lunchtime is certainly less than
But
the,
George, you know what?
5 new fire calls a year.
But that's the point. Assuming that that's true, and that is
well,
the
Kevin already
cost.
made the assumption it's not true, but let's move on.
Yeah, I know. I don't think those are accurate. But assuming they are true numbers, and that is the cost, and that is the cost.
But
They
you know
should be
what,
obligated
the
to pay.
whole premise of basing it on trying to estimate what something is going to cost is why the town and the school district and the county and the state are in the desperate financial condition we're in. If everybody just paid what it cost that year, we'd all be able to afford to live here. So what I don't why are we trying to guess how to open our veins the least possible amount through an IDA instead of just, it seems to me that the planning board should,
The
do
burden
its due
should be
diligence.
opposite. The burden shouldn't be for us.
Right. Why can't we just
To try to refute what
go-
it costs. It should be for them to prove that we should deviate from just splitting it out.
I don't
and-
understand why
and
we
having them
do this
pay what
at
they're
all.
supposed to pay.
Why doesn't the IDA just step away? Well, the planning board can approve a housing project anytime it wants to
Here's
and
why.
let it be on the tax rolls.
Because you can pay people to generate statistics to prove whatever point you want.
But I'm just saying,
that's
take
the
this
problem.
out of the IDA's world. Let this go before the planning board. Let them talk about parking and vernal pools and all of the issues that are part of planning, and just let it be a regular housing project for which there is community support. But why can't it be taxed the way any other apartment would be taxed in New Paltz? That just seems to me to be.
I don't disagree with you at all, but this was a question I think I asked you a long time ago, if I remember correctly. Part of the problem is, and correct me if I'm completely wrong, because the IDA is this established organization, because the ability legally for a project to apply for it, there's legal standing for them to be able to come into a community. The IDA made it possible by creating this category for them to apply under it. And so the problem is the town could say, we don't support an IDA, we just want you to pay full taxes, go through the planning process, and we'll talk to you about your water system later on, okay, when the time comes. We could do that, but ultimately, again,
Then
we
let-
don't have the legal standing to
Well-
force them to pay taxes and
that's
force
what-
the IDA to say no, because there's a process in place that they're allowed to go through.
But that's why we have to talk about challenging the process. If the county
We could choose to do
wants
that.
to waive their share of the taxes, so be it. But the county should not make the decision that we waive our portion.
And
That's
the
the
county
problem.
can't afford to waive its portion. I mean, the amount, the irony of the amount of layoffs of county employees so that we can have
1% sales tax.
one security guard at Park Point. I think there's 2 full-time jobs. Meanwhile, they lay off mental health workers, social workers. The DOT is laying off bridge inspectors.
So who does it
Okay.
really benefit?
Well, that's what the IDA is supposed to answer to us. The IDA is supposed to tell us, at what point does the IDA stand up and state, because, I don't want to go into the history of IDAs, but when are they supposed to stand up and say, New Paltz, here is the benefit that we see, and this is why we're going to go forward with it. Why can't the IDA at any given point, and to everyone's point here, just simply state, you know what? There's no benefit here to this community. You're just simply asking for a tax break, which I don't blame them. I mean, I don't blame any
Of course,
businessman for
if
doing
anybody
it.
has that
Heck, yeah.
opportunity, why would they go for it?
Yes.
I
The
mean, that's
conclusion happens with the final approval resolution.
That's not
Just
the final.
But George, if they shared their pro forma, you could look at it and see whether or not the pro forma, even with taxes, would produce a reasonable rate of return on their investment. So why do they need to have 2 or 3x return on their investment? Who does that benefit? It doesn't benefit the community. It benefits whoever owns the project. In addition to that, they get depreciation. So whatever money they're bringing in is going to be tax-free anyway. And if they turn it over to a not-for-profit, I don't even know if there's a tax consequence.
So,
Those are what I consider meta questions about how the whole process works.
So,
In
again,
terms-
can the planning board disapprove, can the planning board not approve a project because its economic
No.
impact is
No.
flawed?
No, they can't.
Well, the economic analysis, it cannot disapprove it, but it could get to a point where it says we're unable to come to a conclusion of the process because you've given us.
but the project is a good project. So,
Right, so wait,
so you
this is
challenge
key.
it at another
Okay.
level.
We're just saying
Let me
that
just-
if the
something to make
economics
clarify
don't
this.
work, the planning board has the right to say, this doesn't
Yes, and
work.
we've already said this fiscal impact analysis needs to be reviewed and by a private, independent consultant,
Right.
retained by the town, and he's going to tell us whether or not these assumptions are correct. And if they're not correct, he's going to provide us with his estimate as to what they are.
But there's the other side of the argument too, where they can basically say that the assumptions being brought forward. Now, right now, we've only gotten the police department's numbers that that were developed by a police commissioner, Ira Margolis,
Yes.
developed a bunch of numbers for the police department. We've still yet to get the fire department or the rescue squad. But anyway, the only point I want to make is the same thing where they're going to look at points numbers and say their assumptions are wrong and this is why. They also can turn around and say the town assumptions are wrong and this is why. I don't know what the planning board does at that point, but I can tell you I already know from not my conversation, but an initial conversation that the engineer, Dave Klausner, on behalf of the planning board had with them. I think they doubt some of the assumptions
Why?
that the police commission gave them.
Why do we have to piecemeal this?
I agree with you.
Katie's point.
I agree with you
Because,
wholeheartedly. It's
look,
insane.
The bottom,
Let me clarify this, because it's, I think, relevant to what you're asking. They have submitted to us a final, their draft of what they consider to be the final EIS. That becomes the planning board document. We have to, if they didn't submit it, we'd have to do it ourselves. Typically, an applicant submits it, and the planning board changes it so that it does reflect the planning board or lead agency's perspective. That is where this is at right now. This is their, this is a draft they're giving us to review. It is not a final document. It's not something the planning board in any respect has approved or acquiesced in, other than to accept it for review. We are reviewing different sections of it each meeting. We're going through the soil section right now. The fiscal impact analysis has essentially been deferred until we can have our consultant take a look at it, who is
CGR, ironically enough.
so
I wish I just want to comment when I called CGR today to try to, finalize like the contract that is going to come back to both boards. And I said, are you crazy? I said, you're already like, shell-shocked about, taking on the consolidation, and now you're taking on this? Do you understand what you're doing? Are you nuts?
No, I think this is a great
So,
project for that.
once the planning board finalizes that as their perspective, okay,
There will be a public hearing
there'll be a public hearing, okay?
to receive comment on the parts that were not
And
considered at the last
and
one.
then after that, public hearing's closed, and then the planning board makes a decision on the project.
It adopts findings.
Right.
Findings set forth mitigation measures,
Right.
some of which are within the planning board's control, some are other agencies.
What jurisdiction do they have over fiscal?
They have no direct site plan or land use approval related jurisdiction. They can identify, and one of the purposes we're focused on is identifying the impacts that are taking place on the town because of the proposed IDA.
Okay, suppose they identify those impacts and say they're significant, et cetera. What happens in the
The
process?
IDA then has to adopt its own findings if it chooses to move forward with an IDA or other financing, and it takes into account the impacts that are identified, and it should consider the mitigation that's been identified there and determine whether it's feasible.
But that doesn't stop the project from proceeding,
Correct.
correct? So, once the project gets to that point, it's still going, and then it's in the hands of the IDA to determine whether or not they're going to do what they're going to do or not. Is that
With
basically
respect to
true?
the pilot.
With
But
respect
they
to
don't
a
need to,
pilot.
they don't need to approve prior to IDA. They can wait for an IDA determination because the planning board is going to put their initial on the corner of every single page of
We have- we
1,600
have to
pages
finish
or whatever it is.
secret.
So
Yeah.
can we wait until after the IDA makes their determination?
To do what?
To do what?
Us, you mean the planning board,
Yeah.
I mean?
I mean, wait for the
No,
planning
the
board.
planning board
They can't make
has
a
to
determination
submit
until, if you look at this flow chart, which is why George asked me to get it, and right now they're looking at a standard pilot, not deviated, they can't make their final approval until after the seeker is done.
Who
And
is they?
The IDA.
I'm not worried about the IDA. Once the project gets through
But the seeker is done by the planning board.
Right.
So
Well,
once.
it's actually done by both, but the EIS is done, and they have to
So,
be consistent.
I
Well,
just,
the IDA is not part of the seeker process.
They are.
Oh, they are?
wait. So,
We're in
wait,
secret.
going back to this,
The
this
secret
public hearing
resolution
is the
after the public
IDA?
hearing.
This public hearing
Oh,
is the
this is the seeker
IDA?
resolution that's their seeker resolution.
They-
Oh.
This isn't ours. This is an IDA flow chart. This
Yeah,
isn't
no, I understand
ours.
that, but I
The
thought it was
IDA
after our
has a
seeker.
public hearing and then
They
has
do a
the
It's
seeker?
seeker, based on the public hearing, and in this case, the EIS.
So the public hearing
So they haven't
stays
even, they
open?
haven't scheduled their public
They
hearing.
haven't even gotten to the
also.
first, they haven't even gotten the first public hearing, Jeff. They're up at the top where it says draft final application. They haven't done the public hearing on the draft and file application.
No, they just have a resolution. Isn't that resolution
No, I think
to
they're in
set
the
a
third
date
box
for a
down.
They're in the
public?
third box. This is what I was told by Marge Gallagher today. She said, Susan, we're in the draft final application. So it starts with UCID, just
Yeah,
for the purposes of the public listening, UCIDA process for leaseback. Then they meet with staff or of offices of business services. Then they do a draft file application, which is where they're at now.
Right.
They have not done their public hearing on the resolution for the application.
Wait,
Once it's done-
stop there. I thought this resolution was to set a public hearing date. What is,
That is what the IDA will do when they feel they're at an appropriate juncture.
so this box number 4, what resolution occurs at this public
It's a
hearing?
resolution by the IDA literally setting a public
To
hearing.
set the public hearing. It is not a public
Right.
hearing.
Right, so they do that.
That's
Then
to
you go-
set a public
Right,
hearing.
then you go to the
Okay.
standard pilot, because right now supposedly it's a standard, they're not doing deviation. Then they post notices to the taxing authority of a public hearing. Then they have the public hearing. Then they do their seeker resolution, so it's their seeker resolution. Then they do final approval resolution or disapproval, and then project closing. And then it goes down into sales abatements and mortgage recording and
All right.
annual reporting by
So my
UCIDA.
question is, in order to get to their public hearing, the New Paltz Planning Board has to have accepted the FEIS and done seeker and finished with it?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
They could conduct a public hearing at any point. They could open a public hearing now and continue it until the FEIS is complete. You would typically expect they would have the FEIS for the public hearing, before the public hearing concludes.
I thought that the planning board had to approve a project before the IDA wanted to schedule a public hearing.
Well, want to is, what they would prefer, I think, is to have a public hearing on a specific plan. And
Okay, so let me ask a question. I'm going to cut through all of this for a second and talk about, and I don't know if it's strategy or not strategy, but I feel comfortable talking about it out here. So, okay, my belief is they want to do this project sooner than later because they're financing, and the longer it takes, the more the finance, that they carry the, I don't know if they've renegotiated their financing, but I know at one point they wanted to try to have shovels in the ground in the spring, which is obviously not happening. But that's what they, at one point, were saying. You know, what if the town board, and I don't know if we can't, or whatever, it's just a suggestion, if the town board wrote a letter to the IDA and to Park Point saying that we don't believe that this definition of, dormitory is appropriate for IDA funding. We don't believe that the need for IDA funding affects this project relative to the fact that it would go elsewhere because it's specific to New Paltz for a specific New Paltz need. And we say we don't support, as a municipality, moving forward with a payment in lieu of taxes. And we would like for them to consider waiving the pilot, BCAD, to put this on hold, and then we will negotiate moving forward on the water system and every other thing that they need simultaneously to the planning board process to see where this project goes, and let them respond.
Why,
I don't know if we could legally or not do it, I don't know, but,
why would they want to take any of those steps without knowing whether or not they're going to get the pilot?
Well, I think
Well, no,
they
it's-
say, here's the thing, I think they know that they have a pretty good chance of getting the pilot, because the definition is there. I think they feel comfortable they're gonna get some kind of a pilot, okay? So, assuming that, we could facilitate the project and have it shovel-ready if we could come together and negotiate something that was fair. Now, they'd have to share their pro forma with us. We'd have to see their financials and come up with something that was reasonable. And we could help them, they could help us, instead of going through this process. My question is, and if we're gonna talk about this in public, at what point do we as a town board move to block them if they get the pilot that's against our interest? At what
What do you
point
mean by block?
sue the county, okay, for
Well-
granting a pilot in this particular community, which has serious economic problems and tax problems because of the number of properties that are off the tax rolls?
4 months after the action is taken. That's your timeframe.
Okay.
You can't sue them until they
Okay,
take the action.
okay, so that's, keeping that in the parking lot.
the
The
core
part
parking
of the
lot that we just
process
lost up.
that I don't understand is, if the planning board accepts the FEIS, and that is submitted to the county for them to use for their public hearing, that document will have accepted the calculations that are
Not those
used for.
calculations.
They can do whatever they want, right?
Well,
When the
I'm
FEIS
saying
is
the-
issued, which is, it'll be accepted, it'll be, trying to think of the exact term. The IDA will get notice of completion and a copy of the FEIS as done by the planning board. The planning board is going to look at those numbers and determine which, if any, it accepts. It's going to hear the testimony from its consultant, will make its determination about what it accepts as impacts. So when the IDA gets it, it's going to get the planning board's accepted
okay.
version.
So that's the impact side of it, that's the cost side. Is there going to be an assumption that the New Paltz Planning Board will have signed on to that says this is the revenue we are expecting?
Well, there will be discussion, you analyze the impacts, and you analyze the mitigation for the impacts. So if you have a cost to the community and public services, and impacts the result as a consequence of the pilot, the question is, you identify those in the FEIS, and then you identify mitigation for those impacts.
So, I mean, does the
So,
town have
as-
any standing to go to the IDA and say, we need more help than just possibly taking some of the bite out of the impacts? We would actually like new industrial projects that come into our community to help reduce the tax burden for other people. Not simply, do no
Engage.
harm, but actually do some good.
Well,
You-
technically, go
Yeah,
ahead,
you
I'm sorry.
could certainly say that, you could say that on a project, you could say that on a general statement, certainly.
But see, this is a joke of the IDAs, okay? Because technically, the purpose of the IDAs were to help bring in businesses that were going to provide good jobs for the people of the community. And that was, it's because if you don't do the incentive, the tax incentive, they're going to go elsewhere. And the whole purpose is to create good jobs for a community. There's not one IDA project that ultimately comes in really that at the end of the day provides good jobs or even the amount of jobs or whatever. So it's all just become a
Well, actually,
giveaway
no, wait.
tax, you know,
Yeah,
to,
well,
you
no,
know.
wait, to be careful, and I will defend the IDA a little bit, though. So, for example, the IDA was just here, they had their hearing.
Well,
They
Viking
are-
Industries,
they-
that's
They are
true.
going to help Viking
That's
Industries,
true.
which has been a wonderful
true.
corporate
That's true.
client here, and they're a great citizen in our
agree with
community,
you.
and Viking Industries is adding like another 30 jobs.
And I
So
did,
that's what the IDA
and I
does.
did come, and
That's what they should.
IDA does a good job now.
and I
then they
did
went-
come, and I
They
did
are
come and
the
testify,
exception.
just so you
and
know.
then-
I
and
did
years ago,
testify.
they gave IDA gave a huge break to Frito-Lay, which produced
2 jobs?
-4 jobs. It produced nothing, and that's an example where they failed. So they,
Yeah.
and, you know, and
Yes,
it's
yes,
where
you're
the
right,
idea
Jeff.
is good. Not only do they in theory encourage new companies coming in, but they also have a mechanism for existing companies to expand and get tax breaks.
Right.
And it does work,
But in this
very
particular-
rarely. In this particular one is, so I don't know if we need to get
Okay.
so wordy. I mean, it's almost like sending a question, and do they have a responsibility to answer? Does the UCIDA have responsibility to answer if we say, we do not?
They don't have a responsibility. If you read through the minutes, it's interesting because individual residents are there and there's a question and answer back and forth. Individual members state what they believe about the question they were asked. It doesn't bind the IDA as the IDA, but it's, you know, giving you a sense of what.
Well, my question is this. Once the planning board finishes their work, all right, the IDA is free to adopt or not adopt or create new assumptions for purposes of granting or not granting the pilot, correct? In other words, the IDA is autonomous.
Yes.
They're a separate
Yes.
decision maker that has nothing to do with the planning board. Once the planning board is done with their work, the IDA does their own thing.
They do their thing, and it is constrained to some extent by seeker, because before they do their determination, they have to make a seeker resolution.
Right, but in reality, they can do whatever they want.
It's based on the record before them, yeah.
Right.
Okay, but
Yeah,
I
I mean,
want to go
that's
back to, I want to go
pretty
back.
clear. They are a taxing jurisdiction that supersedes us.
Well, not the IDA, it's
Rules.
Ulster County,
Right.
not the IDA. Ulster County is a taxing jurisdiction. I don't want to say
But I want to go
supersedes,
back
but-
to, I want to go back
They
to.
do,
Well.
that's what's in the FE, I mean, Park Point makes it very
Affect
clear.
the county, the town, the school district.
Well, they make the decision whether they're going to get this tax.
Yes.
So they do have some skin in the
Maybe some
game.
The
scary,
thing that I would say you might want to explore is in a discussion with Mr. Halloran, who was no longer chairman, but was at the time. He pointed out that when the taxing jurisdictions come to the IDA and they have agreement on a pilot agreement payment schedule that's acceptable to everybody, the IDA will be inclined to approve it. You know, he said they would approve it. So if you guys go out and you sit with the school board, you sit with the county, and say, here's what's fair and here's how much, and the applicant agrees that's how much, you guys divide it up however you wish. If you all agree as taxing jurisdictions, it'll be divided up in a certain way.
Yeah, but
The IDA will,
here's what Park Point says. Once the policy is set, it is understood that the IDA, as the superseding taxing authority, has balanced those competing policies, and the affecting taxing jurisdictions must abide by that decision.
that's,
So if we, if we
well,
can't
yeah,
come
but
to,
that's what they say from the law. The reality is, the IDA is saying, if you tell us how you want to divide up the pie,
Yeah, but that's still, but they're saying dividing up the pie, they're not saying, you're starting from the premise of, well, not you, I don't mean it that way, but it's starting from the premise that they're not paying the full value of taxes. So it's like, what are we willing to accept?
Right.
And then how do we divide it up, okay?
Yeah.
Versus saying that, why should we accept less? And what's the benefit, to the taxpayer?
There is-
And maybe it's a water system, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, I don't know. I'm just saying at the
There
end
is
of the
the-
day, you're starting with the assumption that it's less than paying the full share, and what are we going to agree to? How do we divvy it up? And then they'll say, okay, fine, if that's what you want. But it's not going back and saying, well, what we want is the full share divvied up in the equitable way. Actually,
Well,
quite frankly, I want, out of the whole full share, I want a bigger share than the school district gets, because the truth of the matter is the impact's going to be on us for the police, not on the school district for the kids.
Right.
So, okay, so you can say, like, let's start with the assumption of full value and we want more of it. That's my negotiation.
Well, the only negotiations I ever got to be part of were with Woodland Pond, and my sense was that the ladder had been built by the IDA, and there really wasn't a lot of room for negotiation. We were pretty much given what the 10, 20-year payments were going to look like.
There is a letter set forth in their policy, and it says, if this policy applies to you, this is the way we apply it to you. The steps in the ladder. However, that does not mean that you cannot negotiate a deviated pilot where everybody at the table says, this is what we want.
Why isn't that happening now?
Everybody isn't at the table.
We can't even get the fire department and
But
ambulance to give us.
I don't want to have to
We shouldn't
build our
have to
case
do
by
that.
saying, oh my God, we're going to need a new fire truck and this is going to, I don't want to do that.
Well-
I
I
want
know.
everybody to have to pay what it costs to run the town that month.
Can I write
Well,
that down?
Here.
Well, that could,
that's the threshold question. Is the pilot available or not? Okay, if it's not available, everybody pays their taxes.
so that's the problem. So I'm going to go back to two things, and maybe we want to start to wrap it up in a sense, and come up with whatever. So two things. I want to go back, Kevin, to you saying that they feel pretty confident that they'll get a pilot. Okay, because there's a belief out there that if the town says to the UCIDA, we don't want you to give a pilot, that they won't give a pilot. So we should just tell them now not to give a pilot, and they won't. Well, I don't believe ultimately, they might choose.
If you look to the minutes, there is a discussion about that point. As I recall, the IDA members that responded said, we will strongly consider the town and the other taxing jurisdictions' viewpoint. To me, that means you've got a lot of push, but it's not, you don't.
We don't have the ultimate
You don't
decision.
control.
So that's the point first that I want to make, is that we don't have the ultimate decision. We could strongly say that we don't support, which is what I said at the beginning. We don't believe this falls into the jurisdiction, blah, 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 and we don't believe this should be eligible for a pilot. And they could strongly consider it, and they could turn around and come back and say, we strongly considered it, but we don't agree. Okay, so, so I want to start with the assumption that well, not the assumption, we don't have the ultimate authority, they do, because by law, they have the right to go, okay? In terms of whether or not they assume that they have a good chance of getting it or not, that I can't say. I don't know if they do believe it or not, and I don't know if the IDA will be inclined to do it or not. My belief is that yes, I think they will get, I believe for political reasons, and I'll just leave it at that, outside of this town, from the county level up to the state, I believe that they will get some kind of advantage, okay? And I'll just leave it at that.
political reasons.
For political reasons, it's my personal belief, okay? Could we structure something potentially from a position of strength, okay, going back to, there are ways to say, okay, first of all, if you look and figure out, we got up to about $700,000 just by how we're assessing the value of the different rooms and what we think they should be charged. So if you say there's 700 rooms, we believe it's $900 cost, to cover our cost, blah, blah, it's $700,000. If their taxes is at $1.8 million, I don't know exactly what it would be per year, I think is it 1.8?
What would it be assessed for? It's $3 per thousand.
The assessor did come up with a number, which I can't remember what it is, but she provided some information.
Well, I don't know why I thought I heard about it.
50 million, right?
Did I hear $1.8 million a year?
Let's say 50 million is 1.5.
Okay, so it's 1.5.
Yeah, it's-
Okay, so I'm just saying, so let me just talk about,
What would the breakout be of the 1.5?
well, what I'm trying to say.
Pound count.
I'm not even, I don't know, I'm just sort of like at this point trying to say in a sense that, and it feels like in a way we're driving the train, so I would like to renegotiate what the county and the school district get, but if you start with the fact that you say like, okay, $700,000 is our break point for what we believe you have to charge per room, then you look at the other things of the water system. If we're going to sit down and do a water system, talk about a sewer system, talk about that, how do you assess the value of what the town's going to get out of it, not what you're going to get out of it, but where do we get a benefit, what's the value, and what's that value worth, how do you build a package that might not be all just cash out of pocket, but how do you create a package that gets up to the $1.5 million that has a value to the community in money, paying for each room, and then a value to the community from other things we're going to get from this project that comes up to $1.5 million, that one could say, okay, fine, we could live with this.
Why aren't we doing that?
Well, we can be right now. I don't know. I'm putting that on the table.
Shouldn't we be doing that?
I think there's a benefit to working through that, either among yourselves or with the involvement of the applicant. I mean, the applicant's in a hard position because every time he says, I can go this far, then he can't go back. So, as a human nature is, tell me what you want and I'll see if I can fit it. And then it's like the adversarial system. One person says something and you argue with them about whether that's true, and you move on from there. But this is not, you need something where there's more collaboration and cooperation.
Okay, so look, again, there's some things happening with us developing a town mortgage system that might have impact on this, that, we don't, hopefully we'll know in a short amount of time. We can continue the conversations. I think we all pretty much know where we want to go. I'm sure whoever's watching this tonight from Park Point knows where we want to go, kind of thing. I think the IDA sort of has a sense. I don't think they don't know.
Well, next meeting is July 10th at 8 o'clock.
Well, I'll go up there and talk to them myself.
So we can all,
I
what
mean,
do we all
I
plan
very
on July
much- I
10th for
want to
all of us to
have-
be there?
We should have,
So let's all the whole board, be there July 10th at 8 o'clock in
we
the
should
morning?
know what we're going to say.
July 10th?
8
Right.
a.m.
We're going to say.
Right, but let's,
Unfortunately, they always hold them during working hours.
I know.
And that's the one tremendous difficulty. It's,
Yeah.
It's July 10th at 8
It's
a.m.
all
at,
planned
but
and it's
I
in-
would just
it's
like
in
us
the-
to
Is it the county building
have a
now?
prepared
I'm
statement.
not sure, but it's on their website.
Okay.
But I think that the concept that we can
Here's the prepared statement.
go beyond what their ladder shows.
Right.
Oh, and is it really a 47-year proposed pilot?
Yeah, 47. No, 25.
25 years.
The
20.
lease
Any
is,
questions?
the the offer, the arrangements they're talking about, 25-year pilot. It's a 46, I think, term lease.
yes.
In that intervening period, they would be paying full market
If.
value, they say. And we would have a development
Why
agreement.
can't
if-
anything ever be
if
in
it-
my lifetime?
If it,
Why, you plan on going somewhere within 25 years?
George, if they sold or transferred the project to the school after the pilot,
Up to the non-for-profit.
it would be
Yeah.
tax-free.
Well,
It would, if anything, it would go to the non-for-profit
not
association.
necessarily be tax-free. If there's an agreement among all the parties who now have an interest, and it's recorded, and it says, this is what will happen, we agree, and this is, we recognize the town is acting in
So
reliance.
why don't
upon
we have
representation.
a 46-year pilot?
Why don't we have a 10-year
No, no.
pilot?
You see,
No, he wants to go beyond. He
I want
wants
to go
to,
beyond and lock it in.
well, that's a deviated pilot.
Well, right now, if we implement the representations they're making and they're enforced, that would pay full value for that period of time, up to 46.
If,
Well, that's, you put these people
but how,
through.
you can't guarantee that payment though, right?
Well, you
Things
can-
can happen.
You can guarantee that they will not take advantage of the exempt status. They can represent to you, this is what we will do.
Okay.
For that period of time, I believe they would be bound. And obviously, we'd want to make sure there's no legal impediment.
So those representations would inure or be subject to, or obligations would be assumed by anybody that would acquire the.
Yes, that's key to me, because there is a market in these projects. I was reading about one in Los Angeles that was sold last year for a fair amount of money, like $100 million.
All right, so those provisions will run with the project then, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean that they will not come back and tell you, this is the reason why we've got to modify it, but you'll agree.
Now, one advantage, so for example, one of them is under a pilot. So a pilot can also serve as well, but there's lots of things you can negotiate. And one of them is also like the taxing, because they split up the taxes as they are now. So it was like 15% to the county, 59% to the school, and then 26%, because that's what they
Yeah, we're
represent.
going to negotiation.
So if it's 15 to the county,
School
that's
district.
fine, but the school district in no way should get 59.
As long
So
as-
the advantage would be
Right.
is that we can negotiate it so they wouldn't be getting 59% of it.
Except for the fact that you have to get the school board to buy in.
Don't forget, though, don't forget.
Yes and no.
Don't forget that what we're doing is, I still come back to this, even though we're talking about negotiating, I still come back to the point, which is, they should be paying what everybody else is paying.
Yes.
If the project makes a good rate of return, and I would think that a
$6 million a year. is a great
four-bedroom,
deal.
1,200 square foot apartment that is yielding a $2,100 a month rent.
What, $6 million,
And that's,
$6 million
by the way,
a year.
that's an average rent,
Yeah.
so the two bedrooms are generating the 2,100 as well. So the square footage number is even smaller on average. I mean, that is a great return on your investment. It's gotta be.
It's like Warren Buffett.
Do they
and
share their pro forma with the IDA?
With
Do
Warren
they
Buffett and
share
what?
the performance?
No,
I'm
I
not certain.
tried to
think
get
so.
it once, and I
You know,
was
it's
told I'd
funny.
have to foil
So,
it.
you know, Apple Computer could come in here making billions of dollars and request a pilot. Now, does that make sense at all?
Kevin, did General Electric
That's
pay
essentially
taxes
what's
last year?
No, I know.
Okay,
It's-
so, I mean, it's rhetorical. It's all ridiculous, okay? The people with the money don't pay anything, the people who don't have money pay everything.
The little
Okay, so
people.
at the end of the day, it's a screwed up system, and short of a revolution, I don't know how we're gonna get out of
When
it.
everybody thought I was a Republican, and I agree with you.
Which is why you're now a Democrat, Kevin. That's why you're now, which is why you're now a
Crossing
Democrat.
over, all right. So we're going to go to the meeting
Yeah, we're gonna,
on July 10th, and we're going to
You
have a
to post
plan.
it. You may have to post it.
Because we're all there as a joint,
Going.
as a board.
let's do it.
So I can, so.
Not
We're
only
gonna have a
that,
town
we can
board
speak as
meeting.
individuals, because it's not, we're not.
No, no,
Yeah,
but
each other.
I actually think, no, actually, I actually.
We don't
We
anyway.
want to do that.
No,
we
no,
don't
I
anyway.
think, I was about to say,
Before.
no, but I was gonna say, I actually like the idea of us passing a motion that the town board will be, the town board will be
Convening.
attending, the IDA, the Ulster County IDA on July 10th at AM for the purpose of speaking as a board on the issue of payment in lieu of taxes for Park Point. And we put it, we vote on it, I make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Let's discuss. Okay, so, and then we send a notice out to the paper
Right.
saying the town board will be
Right,
going
we'll do it.
together as a town board to make a statement on behalf of this town at such and such a meeting at 8 o'clock, whatever, and so we're legal.
Okay?
Okay, so we have that motion a second, and tomorrow, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll,
And I
Roseanne,
would,
if...
I would also like the board to consider
Now we can talk to each other at the meeting, so we don't have to worry.
authorizing George to consider drafting a strategy for us in the event that we are forced to take action. I want you to think about that.
Well,
I would
well,
say
I
that
want to
maybe-
be,
that might be, he's the attorney for the planning board for the moment.
well, his firm could do it, couldn't they?
I think,
I don't think
if you want to
it's
talk
conflict.
about litigation, we can go into executive session.
Well,
Okay,
I'm
and the
not
strategy.
talking about it yet.
Okay, but I just think for the moment, you're putting George in an uncomfortable position as a planning board
So if
attorney.
that's true,
who-
whatever you want to do, I want to discuss this. I want a strategy for how we will address things if they don't go reasonably.
We will decide at that point.
But I want to make sure that the town takes a posture that will be consistent with success in the future. You follow me?
That's your win.
Yes.
That's your win.
What'd you say?
All right,
That's your win.
okay.
That's what?
So,
That you will win.
Oh, that we win.
right,
Well, right.
a winnable posture.
Yeah, that's a
As
very
opposed to the
difficult task in certain
supine,
things, but-
pathetic, abject posture that we've had
Well,
to take so far.
You are going, if you're going to speak to the IDA, you have generic concerns, not just this project.
Right.
but You have generic concerns.
Absolutely. the fact that people can't afford to live in New Paltz anymore because everything's off the tax rolls, and the few people that are left are paying everything, and it's getting more expensive, and so they're now
No, we got,
leaving.
Okay, all right.
10:32.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, is there anything
George?
else? Are we all okay?
Free to go?
Thank
We'll
you,
just
George,
leave
so
you,
much
I
for
did
coming.
make extra copies
Yeah, I'll
of some
take it, I'll
things.
take it.
Is this the
That's
main
the
minute?
seeker regulations, the IDA mission statement, and I think I did find a copy of
Do
that.
you want the wampum agreement?
We're gonna roll down the river with the,
And
I gave
these,
you one right there.
these are the,
okay.
these are the minutes from the 13th when the applicant did make a presentation. There's discussion
Thank you for all of this, it's very
by the
helpful.
public, and there's discussion by the IDA.
And George, I just want to say this one, I really like the project. I have no problem with
I
the
like the
project
project, too.
whatsoever.
George, you and I have discussed this at many
think
planning
we
board
all
meetings.
agree
We like the
on that.
project. It's,
Well,
at what cost?
I would prefer that there was some retail.
Thank you.
That could still maybe be negotiated.
Well, that's
Okay,
when
what's
they-
next, guys?
All right.
Okay, so what we have, thanks, George, so much, okay, thanks. So what we need to do is, as you know, we hired a part-time bookkeeper to help us because of the,
George, very much, right?
the health issues of our existing bookkeeper, and we're at a point right now where we really actually need to increase the hours of the part-time bookkeeper to help get the work that's needs to get done. So what I'd like to do, I spoke with the part-time bookkeeper. She can't go full-time until September because of her kid's schedule and the fact that he's in camp. But she's at 15 to 20 hours now. I'd like for us to authorize her from 20 to 30, anywhere between 20 and 30 hours that she could work every week, and it'll be flexible, but depending on her kid's schedule and stuff. And we have the money, so it's not a problem.
This will
because-
trigger putting her into the union.
Well, you know what, it's funny, because I didn't bring that up today, and I thought about that, but I think for the time being, I don't think that's a problem for her in terms of, you know, her going into the union or all that kind of stuff. I can call
It'll
George.
also, it'll also trigger benefits. You go up to 30 hours, it's going to trigger
Yeah, but
benefits.
she might be willing, for the moment, not to take that. I just think we're in a situation,
30 doesn't trigger.
Right now,
Why don't we say
well,
20 to 29?
Yeah.
well, the union contract is at
30.
30. If we accept that union contract, it's 30.
29.
We can do 20 to 29.
Okay.
All right?
So, do I have a second?
second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, thanks, because we're really,
All in favor?
all in favor? Okay, motion so carried. And I'll just do really quickly the grievance. We just have a situation right now, we've started to look at other buildings because we all knew that there was problems here. And we have been looking at some other buildings. Kevin and I looked at a particular building. We have a proposal from another building for us to rent with an option to buy. We're not looking to do that right now. But we have been working on it, but we're at a point now that the members of town hall, because, you know, there's like exposed asbestos, you know, people are breathing it in, there's problems with, but there's problems. But so anyway, long and short of the fact is that there was a grievance that was going to be brought forward. We were told today that it could go up to PESH, which is a public employee thing, and they would come down and do something. Because they know that we're working on this, they're not going to do any kind of legal action to us. It's just, I just want to let everybody know that we have to start to come up with some idea of what we're going to do for a temporary situation to get ourselves out of this building, protect the employees as we look for a long-term solution. That's all I want to bring out and say, and we're end of story. So we're working with the employees. So that's it,
That's fine.
okay?
Good.
Good. Okay, so,
This is what you're,
okay, and,
you are
So you were saying it's alleged that they're breathing.
no, yes, it's alleged, it's alleged, it's alleged, it's alleged.
Yes.
yeah.
It's alleged.
That would make more money. It's better revenue gen.
Absolutely alleged, thank you, Kevin.
Yes.
But I can't breathe.
Are we finished?
Kitty wanted to go, make a motion to go executive session?
There is a
Contract negotiation?
contract that I think we should talk about.
Want to talk about
Okay,
that in executive session?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, so,
But we're finished otherwise, right?
I don't think there's anything else
You
that we
want
haven't
to talk
done.
about parking or not?
Oh, the courthouse?
Oh, the courthouse, why don't we talk about that real quick?
Well, again, the courthouse parking though could be solved if we
If we leave.
we searched.
But we're in a situation right now where Chris is supposed to do, make signs at a cost to the town. So as I understand it, now, we've never been told by the village board, nobody's ever talked to us, nobody ever asked us how this would impact us, impact our employees, impact anybody. But what my understanding is that the village wants to take the back parking of the parking lot, they want to make it long-term parking, so the employees that work at the downtown can park in this long-term parking lot, leaving more space free on Main Street and the side streets. And then the people who live in residential apartments could do long-term parking. So to do that, they've basically sort of, I guess we used to have a little bit more parking that they were letting us use, but now they're giving us our only set amount of parking, and so therefore we have to put up signs and incur costs to put up signs and say no parking and blah, blah, blah. It ends up, the employees will have the parking, but the judges won't have the parking, and then the people who come to court will have to go to the other side and park on the other side of whatever.
So they're going
And
to come
so-
to court and get a parking ticket.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Well, no, we're going to tell
Well,
them,
I don't
well,
want
we're going to tell the police not.
I don't want to authorize Chris to make any sign, you know what, if there's any signage being made, the village can make it, because everyone's changing
Well, that's the way I wanted to bring it, partly
Yeah.
bring it up, because, again, we were never
I
notified,
wish there was
but,
some discussion.
well, that would have been great if there was discussion. I was very upset when
So-
we found out about it, that,
We own the building, but we don't own
no, we don't own the building, we
anything.
only own part of the
We own
building. We own where the police used to be,
Footprint.
we own where the police used to be and with the court.
We
And then
own,
we have a couple of,
With the extra space in our section that we were supposed to lease to the village?
oh, for the
We-
fire department?
Yeah.
I don't know if that ever happened.
Is it empty? Did they
I think
just take it over?
they're storing
Well,
court
that's-
records there now. We are storing court
Yeah.
records there.
So the fire
So that's not the problem, the problem is the parking, is right now
The
that
fire
they.
department ended up not using it.
That the village, the problem is the village made a decision to implement something that affects us where we never had a conversation, and now we have a cost because we have to post signs.
I
I
understand.
tell you that
I don't think we post signs,
every,
but the village posts signs.
every town hall that you go to for courts has adequate parking. For the people that come there, that are forced to pay their fines.
Yeah, this, I mean, I think it's pretty uncharitable of the village to make people come to court and
So talking to
It's
pay
hard
to
enough to
park.
find our court, now they gotta park out in front, then you gotta walk around.
But it's the village's problem. I mean, they can,
Well, so, I mean, we've never, I mean, actually, what we could do is, look, we've never been told. Nobody's ever told, you know, I mean,
so are they gonna put meters or?
they're gonna put, they're gonna do long-term permit parking in the back. The only reason I know is Chris was given a friendly heads up by somebody, and I won't say who, but he was given a friendly heads up. Chris came in to tell me. I was like beside myself because it's a decision that impacts us, but whatever. So I called a village trustee to say, what's going on? Can you please explain this to me? How does this impact us and whatever? And that's when I learned that they want to do the long-term parking in the back for the purposes of freeing up stuff on Main Street and for some of the residents, which might not be a bad idea, but it's, again, it impacts us, and it would have been nice if they talked to us.
You know, it's one of the
And so-
few places when there's nowhere to park. If you want to go to Main Street, you can park. It's really a shame.
So,
Wow.
Okay, so we're done with that discussion.
Yeah.
Well, I guess so
Chris
for the
doesn't need-
moment-
Chris doesn't need to make any signs. The village, if they want to put up signage to stop people from parking improperly, they're more than welcome to, but.
do you want to do that in the form of a motion, or do you?
No, we're
Okay.
taking no action.
We're taking no action,
We're
okay,
taking
fine.
no action.
I mean, I did send Chris.
I mean, I would take action if I had a map in front of me, a layout of all the spaces and how it was going to work. I would gladly sit here. But we have nothing in front of us to
Okay.
even know how many
Oh,
spaces.
we
Okay.
wanted us to set a date, Rosanna wanted us to set a date for a joint meeting.
Well, she sent out an email today.
Right. Did you get any responses back?
Ariana says she's not going to be available, and she thinks that Sally won't be available either all next week.
Okay,
Next week?
so then we'd have to go into the following week, but the
But we're
problem
in a holiday week, right?
is,
All right.
CBOS may be willing to go to your office the following week, so that's also the village's.
a board meeting,
Yeah, so that probably.
unless the village board allows, unless we
What
schedule it
about
the night.
the 8th,
What day?
Planning board meeting.
Tuesday the 8th?
Well, we could do it early, if we could do it
Monday,
like, if we could do it very early, you know, like 6 o'clock or something. The only problem is just that the hope was for CRG to come down July 20th to start to convene the first community meeting. So the longer we wait to do this, I mean, it is what it is. If it has to get pushed back, it's not, you know, it is what it is. But That's what they were striving for, that July 20th date.
So when is the next village board meeting?
Next Wednesday. Oh, well, no, they're going to skip.
I mean, we could try to do it a little bit early.
That's the 4th.
10.
Oh, no, the 3rd.
Yeah.
The next board meeting is what date?
The 10th,
So what we
second
could,
and fourth Wednesday. So it's
the
the
next
10th.
is the next one. I mean, we could ask for them to, to do it, start an hour early and have a joint town meeting before their meeting and do it an hour early.
Here,
No, we could do it there, I guess.
Well, consolidation meetings were all supposed to be here.
Well, they're all supposed, no, well, actually, we could do it there, but I'm supposed to convene them.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
supposed to chair them.
All right.
Make a motion to go.
Motion to
Do
executive.
you want,
Alright,
so what
so-
do you want to ask, do you want to try to see if we could do 6
July
o'clock?
10th.
July 10th, at like, their meeting starts at 7, like at 6:30?
We're starting off at 8.
No, we're talking about the joint town village meeting.
Oh, but that
Yeah,
day,
long day.
that day,
Oh, we're going at 8 o'clock in the morning to,
July 10th?
Yeah.
I mean, long day.
It's a long day.
today was a long day.
But,
I don't know. We can figure this out later.
All right.
Okay, but wait, we have to make the motion to go to executive sessions for the purposes of discussing contract negotiation.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion so carried. Okay, Rosanna, we're not going to take any action, I suspect,
We're all
right?
set over here.
Okay, so therefore, if the camera wants to go home, and Rosanna, if you want to go home, I can give you,
Yeah, tomorrow we'll meet up then.
well, I'm not going to be here tomorrow, but I can text it to you, or I can do it, I'll leave you a note tonight. I'll leave you a note tonight. Okay.